Section 11 of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Roseanne Schmidt. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 11. Chapter 11. Fluency through Preparation. Omnimus opibusque parati. Ready in mind and resources. Motto of South Carolina. In omnibus negotiis prius quam aggrediare abhibenda est preparatio diligens. In all matters before beginning, a diligent preparation should be made. Cicero de Officis. Take your dictionary and look up the words that contain the Latin stem flu. The results will be suggestive. At first blush, it would seem that fluency consists in a ready, easy use of words. Not so, the flowing quality of speech is much more, for it is a composite effect, with each of its prior conditions deserving of careful notice. The sources of fluency. Speaking broadly, fluently, is almost entirely a matter of preparation. Certainly, native gifts figure largely here, as in every art. But even natural facility is dependent on the very same laws of preparation that hold good for the man of supposedly small native endowment. Let this encourage you if, like Moses, you are prone to complain that you are not a ready speaker. Have you ever stopped to analyze that expression, a ready speaker? Readiness, in its prime sense, is preparedness, and they are most ready who are best prepared. Quick firing depends more on the alert finger than on the hair trigger. Your fluency will be in direct ratio to two important conditions: your knowledge of what you are going to say, and your being accustomed to telling what you know to the audience. This gives us the second great element of fluency. To preparation must be added the ease that arises from practice, of which more presently. Knowledge is essential. Mr. Bryan is a most fluent speaker when he speaks on political problems, tendencies of the time, and questions of morals. It is to be supposed, however, that he would not be so fluent in speaking on the bird life of the Florida Everglades. Mr. John Burroughs might be at his best on this last subject, yet entirely lost in talking about international law. Do not expect to speak fluently on a subject that you know little or nothing about. Sisyphon boasted that he could speak all day, a sin in itself, on any subject that an audience would suggest. He was banished by the Spartans. But preparation goes beyond the getting of the facts in the case you are to present. It includes also the ability to think and arrange your thoughts, a full and precise vocabulary, an easy manner of speech and breathing, absence of self-consciousness, and the several other characteristics of efficient delivery that have deserved special attention in other parts of this book, rather than in this chapter. Preparation may be either general or specific. Usually it should be both. A lifetime of reading, of companionship with stirring thoughts, of wrestling with the problems of life, this constitutes a general preparation of inestimable worth. Out of a well-sorted mind, and, richer still, a broad experience, and, best of all, a warmly sympathetic heart, the speaker will have to draw much material that no immediate study could provide. General preparation consists of all that a man has put into himself, all that heredity and environment have instilled into him, and that other rich source of preparedness for speech, the friendship of wise companions. When Schiller returned home after a visit with Goethe, a friend remarked, "I am amazed by the progress Schiller can make within a single fortnight." It was the progressive influence of a new friendship. Proper friendships form one of the best means for the formation of ideas and ideals, for they enable one to practice in giving expression to thought. The speaker who would speak fluently before an audience should learn to speak fluently and entertainingly with a friend. Clarify your ideas by putting them into words. The talker gains as much from his conversation as the listener. You sometimes begin to converse on a subject thinking you have very little to say, but one idea gives birth to another, and you are surprised to learn that the more you give, the more you have to give. This give and take of friendly conversation develops mentality and fluency in expression. Longfellow said, "A single conversation across the table with a wise man is better than 10 years' study of books." And Holmes, whimsically yet none the less truthfully, declared that half the time he talked to find out what he thought. But that method must not be applied on the platform. After all, this enrichment of life by storage, must come the special preparation for the particular speech. This is of so definite a sort that it warrants separate chapter treatment later. Practice. But preparation must also be of another sort than the gathering, organizing, and shaping of materials. It must include practice, which, like mental preparation, must be both general and special. Do not feel surprised or discouraged if practice on the principles of delivery herein laid down seems to retard your fluency. For a time this will be inevitable. While you are working for proper inflection, for instance, inflection will be demanding your first thoughts, and the flow of your speech for the time being will be secondary. This warning, however, is strictly for the closet, for your practice at home. Do not carry any thoughts of inflection with you to the platform. There you must think only of your subject. There is an absolute telepathy between the audience and the speaker. If your thought goes to your gesture, their thought will too. If your interest goes to quality of your voice, they will be regarding that instead of what your voice is uttering. You have doubtless been adjured to forget everything but your subject. This advice says either too much or too little. The truth is that while on the platform you must not forget a great many things that are not in your subject, but you must not think of them. Your attention must consciously go only to your message, but subconsciously you will be attending to the points of technique which have become more or less habitual by practice. A nice balance between these two kinds of attention is important. You can no more escape this law than you can live without air. Your platform gestures, your voice, your inflection will all be just as good as your habit of gesture, voice, and inflection makes them, no better. Even the thought of whether you are speaking fluently or not will have the effect of marring your flow of speech. Return to the opening chapter on self-confidence, and again lay its precepts to heart. Learn by rules to speak without thinking of rules. That is not, or ought not to be, necessary for you to stop to think how to say the alphabet correctly. As a matter of fact, it is slightly more difficult for you to repeat ZYX than it is to say XYZ. Habit has established the order. Just so you must master the laws of efficiency in speaking until it is a second nature for you to speak correctly rather than otherwise. A speaker at the piano has a great deal of trouble with the mechanics of playing, but as time goes on his fingers become trained and almost instinctively wander over the keys correctly. As an inexperienced speaker, you will find a great deal of difficulty at first in putting principles into practice, for you will be scared, like the young swimmer, and make some crude strokes. But if you persevere, you will win out. Thus, to sum up, the vocabulary you have enlarged by study, the ease of speaking you have developed by practice, the economy of your well-studied emphasis, all will subconsciously come to your aid on the platform. Then the habits you have formed will be earning you a splendid dividend. The fluency of your speech will be at the speed of flow your practice has made habitual. But this means work. What good habit does not? No philosopher's stone that will act as a substitute for laborious practice has ever been found. If it were, it would be thrown away, because it would kill our greatest joy, the delight of acquisition. If public speaking means to you a fuller life, you will know no greater happiness than a well-spoken speech. The time you have spent in gathering ideas and in private practice of speaking you will find amply rewarded. Questions and exercises. 1. What advantages has the fluent speaker over the hesitating talker? 2. What influences within and without the man himself work against fluency? 3. Select from the daily paper some topic for an address and make a 3-minute address on it. Do your words come freely and your sentences flow out rhythmically? Practice on the same topic until they do. 4. Select some subject with which you are familiar and test your fluency by speaking extemporaneously. 5. Take one of the sentiments given below and, following the advice given on pages 118 through 119, construct a short speech beginning with the last word in the sentence. Machinery has created a new economic world. The Socialist Party is a strenuous worker for peace. He was a crushed and broken man when he left prison. War must ultimately give way to worldwide arbitration. The labor unions demand a more equal distribution of the wealth than labor creates. 6. Put the sentiments of Mr. Bryan's Prince of Peace on page 448 into your own words. Honestly criticize your own effort. 7. Take any of the following quotations and make a 5-minute speech on it without pausing to prepare. The first efforts may be very lame, but if you want speed on a typewriter, a record of a 100-yard dash, or facility in speaking, you must practice, practice, practice. There lives more faith in honest doubt, believe me, than in half the creeds. Tennyson, In Memoriam. Howe'er it be, it seems to me, 'tis only noble to be good. Kind hearts are more than coronets, and simple faith than Norman blood. Tennyson, Lady Clara Vere de Vere. 'Tis distance lends enchantment to the view, and robes the mountain in its azure hue. Campbell, Pleasures of Hope. His best companions innocence and health, and his best riches ignorance of wealth. Goldsmith, The Desert Village. Beware of desperate steps, the darkest day, live till tomorrow, will have passed away. Cowper, Needless Alarm. The country is the world, and my religion is to do good. Paine, Rights of Man. Trade it may help society extend, but lures the pirate and corrupts the friend. It raises armies in a nation's aid, and bribes a senate and the lands betrayed. Pope, Moral Essays. O God, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains. Shakespeare, Othello. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the stroll, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. Henley, Invictus. The world is so full of a number of things, I am sure we should all be happy as kings. Stevenson, A Child's Garden of Verses. If your morals are dreary, depend upon it they are wrong. Stevenson, Essays. Every advantage has its tax, I learn to be content. Emerson, Essays. 8. Make a 2-minute speech on any of the following general subjects, but you will find that your ideas will come more readily if you narrow your subject by taking some specific phrase of it. For instance, instead of trying to speak on law in general, take the proposition, the poor man cannot afford to prosecute, or instead of dwelling on leisure, show how modern speed is creating more leisure. In this way you may expand this subject list indefinitely. General themes: law, politics, women's suffrage, initiative and referendum, a larger navy, war, peace, foreign immigration, the liquor traffic, labor unions, strikes, socialism, single tax, tariff, honesty, courage, hope, love, mercy, kindness, justice, progress, machinery, invention, wealth, poverty, architecture, science, surgery, haste, leisure, happiness, health, business, America, the Far East, mobs, colleges, sports, matrimony, divorce, child labor, education, books, the theater, literature, electricity, achievement, failure, public speaking, ideals, conversation, the most dramatic moment of my life, my happiest days, things worth while, what I hope to achieve, my greatest desire, what I would do with $1,000,000, is mankind progressing, our greatest need. End of section 11. Recording by Roseanne Schmidt. Section 12 of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Roseanne Schmidt. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 12. Chapter 12. The Voice. Oh, there is something in that voice that reaches the innermost recesses of my spirit. Longfellow. Christus. The dramatic critic of the London Times once declared that acting is 9/10 voice work. Leaving the message aside, The same may justly be said of public speaking. A rich, correctly used voice is the greatest physical factor of persuasiveness and power, often overtopping the effects of reason. But a good voice, well handled, is not only an effective possession for the professional speaker, it is a mark of the personal culture as well, and even a distinct commercial asset. Gladstone himself, the possessor of a deep musical voice, has said, 90 men in every 100 in the crowded profession will probably never rise above mediocrity, because the training of the voice is entirely neglected and considered of no importance. These are words worth pondering. There are 3 fundamental requisites for a good voice. 1. Ease. Signor Bonci, of the Metropolitan Opera Company, says that the secret of good voice is relaxation. And this is true, for relaxation is the basis of ease. The airwaves that produce voice result in a different kind of tone when striking against relaxed muscles than when striking constricted muscles. Try this for yourself. Contract your muscles of your face and throat as you do in hate, and flame out, "I hate you!" Now relax as you do when thinking gentle, tender thoughts and say, "I love you." How different the voice sounds. In practicing voice exercises and in speaking, never force your tones. Ease must be your watchword. The voice is a delicate instrument, and you must not handle it with hammer and tongs. Don't make your voice go. Let it go. Don't work. Let the yoke of speech be easy and its burden light. Your throat should be free from strain during speech. Therefore it is necessary to avoid muscular contraction. The throat must act as a sort of chimney or funnel for the voice. Hence, an unnatural constriction will not only harm its tones, but injure its health. Nervousness and mental strain are common sources of mouth and throat constriction. So make the battle for poise and self-confidence, for which we pleaded in the opening chapter. But how can I relax, you ask? By simply willing to relax. Hold your arm out straight from your shoulder. Now, withdraw all power and let it fall. Practice relaxation of the muscles of the throat by letting your neck and head fall forward. Roll the upper part of your body around, with the waistline acting as a pivot. Let your head fall and roll around as you shift the torso to different positions. Do not force your head around, simply relax your neck and let gravity pull it around as your body moves. Again, let your head fall forward on your breast. Raise your head, letting your jaw hang. Relax until your jaw feels heavy, as though it were a weight hung to your face. Remember, you must relax the jaw to obtain command of it. It must be free and flexible for the molding of tone, and to let the tone pass out unobstructed. The lips also must be made flexible, to aid in the molding of clear and beautiful tones. For flexibility of lips, repeat the syllables mo, me. In saying mo, bring the lips up to resemble the shape of the letter O. In repeating me, draw them back as you do in a grin. Repeat this exercise rapidly, giving the lips as much exercise as possible. Try the following exercise in the same manner. Mo, o, oo, ah. After this exercise has been mastered, the following will also be found excellent for the flexibility of lips. Memorize these sounds indicated, not the expressions, so that you can repeat them rapidly. A as in may, E as in met, U as in use, A as in I as in ice, Oi as in oil, A as in at, I as in it, U as in hour, O as in no, O as in no, O as in ooze, A as in all, Oo as in foot, A as in ah, E as in eat, Oo as in ooze, E as in eat. All the activity of breathing must be centered, not in the throat, but in the middle of the body. You must breathe from the diaphragm. Note the way you breathe when lying flat on the back, undressed in bed. You will observe that all the activity then centers around the diaphragm. This is the natural and correct method of breathing. By constant watchfulness, make this your habitual manner, for it will enable you to relax more perfectly the muscles of the throat. The next fundamental requisite for good voice is openness. If the muscles of the throat are constricted, the tone passage partially closed, and the mouth kept half shut, how can you expect the tone to come out bright and clear, or even to come out at all? Sound is a series of waves, and if you make a prison of your mouth, holding the jaws and lips rigidly, it will be very difficult for the tone to squeeze through, and even when it does escape, it will lack the force and carrying power. Open your mouth wide, relax all the organs of speech, and let the tone flow out easily. Start to yawn, but instead of yawning, speak while your throat is open. Make this open feeling habitual when speaking. We say make because it is a matter of resolution and of practice. If your vocal organs are healthy, your tone passages may be partially closed by enlarged tonsils, adenoids, or enlarged turbinate bones of the nose. If so, a skilled physician should be consulted. The nose is an important tone passage and should be kept open and free for perfect tones. What we call talking through the nose is not talking through the nose, as you can easily demonstrate by holding your nose as you talk. If you are bothered with nasal tones caused by growths or swellings in the nasal passages, a slight painless operation will remove the obstruction. This is quite important, aside from voice, for the general health will be much lowered if the lungs are continually starved for air. The final fundamental requisite for good voice is forwardness. The voice that is pitched back in the throat is dark, somber, and unattractive. The tone must be pitched forward, but do not force it forward. You will recall that our first principle was ease. Think the tone forward and out. Believe it is going forward and allow it to flow easily. You can tell whether you are placing your tone forward or not by inhaling a deep breath and saying ah, with the mouth wide open, trying to feel the little delicate sound waves strike the bony arch of the mouth just above the front teeth. The sensation is so slight that you will probably not be able to detect it at once, but persevere in your practice, always thinking the tone forward, and you will be rewarded by feeling your voice strike the roof of your mouth. A correct forward placing of the tone will do away with the dark, throaty tones that are so unpleasant, inefficient, and harmful to the throat. Close the lips, humming and on. Think the tone forward. Do you feel it strike the lips? Hold the palm of your hand in front of your face and say vigorously, crash, dash, whirl, buzz. Can you feel the forward tone strike against your hand? Practice until you can. Remember, the only way to get your voice forward is to put it forward. How to develop the carrying power of the voice. It is not necessary to speak loudly in order to be heard at a distance. It is necessary only to speak correctly. Edith Wynne Matheson's voice will carry in a whisper throughout a large theater. A paper rustling on the stage of a large auditorium can be heard distinctly in the furthermost seat in the gallery. If you will only use your voice correctly, you will not have much difficulty in being heard. Of course, it is always well to address your speech to the furthest auditors. If they get it, those nearer will have no trouble. But aside from this obvious suggestion, you must observe these laws of voice production. Remember to apply the principles of ease, openness, and forwardness. They are the prime factors in enabling your voice to be heard at a distance. Do not gaze at the floor as you talk. This habit not only gives the speaker an amateurish appearance, but if the head is hung forward, the voice will be directed towards the ground instead of floating out over the audience. Voice is a series of air vibrations. To strengthen it, two things are necessary: more air or breath, and more vibration. Breath is the very basis of voice. As a bullet with little powder behind it will not have force and carrying power, so the voice that has little breath behind it will be weak. Not only will deep breathing from the diaphragm, give the voice a better support, but it will make it a stronger resonance by improving the general health. Usually, ill health means a weak voice, while abundant physical vitality is shown through a strong, vibrant voice. Therefore, anything that improves the general vitality is an excellent voice strengthener, provided you use the voice properly. Authorities differ on most of the rules of hygiene, but on one point they all agree: vitality and longevity are increased by deep breathing. Practice this until it becomes second nature. Whenever you are speaking, take in deep breaths, but in such a manner that the inhalations will be silent. Do not try to speak too long without renewing your breath. Nature cares for this pretty well unconsciously in conversation, and she will do the same for you in platform speaking if you do not interfere with her premonitions. A certain very successful speaker developed voice carrying power by running across country, practicing his speech as he went. The vigorous exercise forced him to take deep breaths, and developed lung power. A hard-fought basketball or tennis game is an efficient way of practicing deep breathing. When these methods are not convenient, we recommend the following. Place your hands at your sides on the waistline. By trying to encompass your waist with your fingers and thumb, force all the air out of your lungs. Take a deep breath. Remember, all the activity is to be centered in the middle of the body. Do not raise your shoulders. As the breath is taken, your hands will be forced out. Repeat the exercise, placing your hands on the small of the back and forcing them out as you inhale. Many methods for deep breathing have been given by various authorities. Get the air into your lungs. That is the important thing. The body acts as a sounding board for the voice, just as the body of the violin acts as a sounding board for its tones. You can increase its vibrations by practice. Place your fingers on your lips and hum the musical scale, thinking and placing the voice forward on the lips. Do you feel the lips vibrate? After a little practice they will vibrate, giving a tickling sensation. Repeat this exercise, throwing the humming sound into the nose. Hold the upper part of the nose between the thumb and forefinger. Can you feel the nose vibrate? Placing the palm of your hand on top of your head, repeat this humming exercise. Think the voice there as you hum in head tones. Can you feel the vibration there? Now place the palm of your hand on the back of your head, repeating the foregoing process. Then try it on the chest. Always remember to think your tone where you desire to feel the vibrations. The mere act of thinking about any portion of your body will tend to make it vibrate. Repeat the following after a deep inhalation, endeavoring to feel all portions of your body vibrate at the same time. When you have attained this, you will find that it is a pleasant sensation. What ho, my jovial mates, come on, we will frolic it like fairies, frisking in the merry moonshine. Purity of voice. This quality is sometimes destroyed by wasting the breath. Carefully control the breath, using only as much as is necessary for the production of tone. Utilize all that you give out. Failure to do this results in a breathy tone. Take in breath like a prodigal. In speaking, give it out like a miser. Voice suggestions. Never attempt to force your voice when hoarse. Do not drink cold water when speaking. The sudden shock to the heated organs of speech will injure the voice. Avoid pitching your voice too high. It will make it raspy. This is a common fault. When you find your voice is too high a range, lower it. Do not wait until you get to the platform to try this. Practice it in your daily conversation. Repeat the alphabet beginning A on the lowest scale possible and going up a note on each succeeding letter, for the development of range. A wide range will give you facility in making numerous changes of pitch. Do not form the habit of listening to your voice when speaking. You will need your brain to think of what you are saying. Reserve your observation for private practice. Questions and exercises. 1. What are the prime requisites for good voice? 2. Tell why each one is necessary for good voice production. 3. Give some exercises for development of these conditions. 4. Why is range of voice desirable? 5. Tell how range of voice may be cultivated. 6. How much daily practice do you consider necessary for the proper development of your voice? 7. How can resonance and carrying power be developed? 8. What are your voice faults? 9. How are you trying to correct them? End of section 12. Recording by Roseanne Schmidt.
Section 13 of The Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Matthew Reese. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 13. Voice Charm. A cheerful temper, joined with innocence, will make beauty attractive, knowledge delightful, and wit good-natured. Joseph Addison, The Tattler. Poe said that the tone of beauty is sadness, but he was evidently thinking from cause to effect, not contrariwise, for sadness is rarely a producer of beauty. That is peculiarly the province of joy. The exquisite beauty of a sunset is not exhilarating, but tends to a sort of melancholy that is not far from delight. The haunting beauty of deep, quiet music holds more than a tinge of sadness. The lovely minor cadences of birdsong at twilight are almost depressing. The reason we are affected to sadness by certain forms of placid beauty is twofold. Movement is stimulating and joy-producing, while quietude leads to reflection, and reflection in turn often brings out the tone of regretful longing for that which is past. Secondly, quiet beauty produces a vague aspiration for the relatively unattainable, yet does not stimulate to the tremendous effort necessary to make the dimly desired state or object ours. We must distinguish for these reasons between the sadness of beauty and the joy of beauty. True joy is a deep inner thing, and takes in much more than the idea of bounding, sanguine spirits, for it includes a certain active contentedness of heart. In this chapter, however, the word will have its optimistic, exuberant connotation. We are thinking now of vivid, bright-eyed, laughing joy. Musical, joyous tones constitute voice charm, a subtle magnetism that is delightfully contagious. Now, it might seem to the desultory reader that to take the lancet and cut into this alluring voice quality would be to dissect a butterfly wing and so destroy its charm. Yet, how can we induce an effect if we are not certain as to the cause? Nasal resonance produces the bell tones of the voice. The tone passages of the nose must be kept entirely free for the bright tones of the voice. And after our warning in the preceding chapter, you will not confuse what is popularly and erroneously called a nasal tone with the true nasal quality, which is so well illustrated by the voice work of trained French singers and speakers. To develop nasal resonance, sing the following, dwelling as long as possible on the ng sounds. Pitch the voice in the nasal cavity. Practice both in high and low registers, and develop range with brightness. Sing, song. Ding, dong. Hong, kong. Long, thong. Practice in the falsetto voice develops a bright quality in the normal speaking voice. Try the following, and any other selections you choose, in a falsetto voice. A man's falsetto voice is extremely high and womanish, so men should not practice in falsetto after the exercise becomes tiresome. She perfectly scorned the best of his clan, and declared the ninth of any man a perfectly vulgar fraction. The actress Mary Anderson asked the poet Longfellow what she could do to improve her voice. He replied, "Read aloud daily, joyous lyric poetry." The joyous tones are the bright tones. Develop them by exercise. Practice your voice exercises in an attitude of joy. Under the influence of pleasure, the body expands, the tone passages open, the action of heart and lungs is accelerated, and all the primary conditions for good tone are established. More songs float out from the broken windows of the Negro cabins in the South than from the palatial homes on Fifth Avenue. Henry Ward Beecher said the happiest days of his life were not when he had become an international character, but when he was an unknown minister out in Lawrenceville, Ohio, sweeping his own church and working as a carpenter to help pay the grocer. Happiness is largely an attitude of mind, of viewing life from the right angle. The optimistic attitude can be cultivated, and it will express itself in voice charm. A telephone company recently placarded this motto in their booths: The voice with the smile wins. It does. Try it. Reading joyous prose or lyric poetry will help put smile and joy of soul into your voice. The following selections are excellent for practice. Remember that when you first practice these classics, you are to give sole attention to two things: a joyous attitude of heart and body, and bright tones of the voice. After these ends have been attained to your satisfaction, carefully review the principles of public speaking laid down in the preceding chapters, and put them into practice as you read these passages again and again. It would be better to commit each selection to memory. Selections for practice. From Milton's L'Allegro. Haste thee, nymph, and bring with thee jest, and youthful jollity, quips and cranks and wanton wiles, nods and becks and wreathed smiles, such as hang on Hebe's cheek, and love to live in dimple sleek. Sport that wrinkled care derides, and laughter holding both his sides. Come and trip it as ye go on the light fantastic toe, and in thy right hand lead with thee the mountain nymph, sweet Liberty. And if I give thee honour due, Mirth, admit me of thy crew, to live with her and live with thee in unreproved pleasures free. To hear the lark begin his flight, and singing, startle the dull night from his watch-tower in the skies, till the dappled dawn doth rise, then to come in spite of sorrow, and at my window bid good morrow through the sweetbriar, or the vine, or the twisted eglantine, while the cock with lively din scatters the rear of darkness thin, and to the stack or the barn door stoutly struts his dames before. Oft listening how the hounds and horn cheerly rouse the slumbering morn, from the side of some hoar hill, through the high wood echoing shrill, sometime walking not unseen by hedgerow elms on hillocks green, right against the eastern gate, where the great sun begins his state. Robed in flames and amber light, the clouds in thousand liveries dight, while the ploughman near at hand whistles o'er the furrowed land, and the milkmaid, singing blithe, and the mower whets his scythe, and every shepherd tells his tale under the hawthorn in the dale. The Sea. The sea, the open sea, the blue, the fresh, the fever-free, without a mark, without a bound, it runneth the earth's wide regions round. It plays with the clouds, it mocks the skies, or like a cradled creature lies. I'm on the sea. I'm on the sea. I am where I would ever be, with the blue above and the blue below, and silence wheresoe'er I go. If a storm should come and awake the deep, what matter? I shall ride and sleep. I love, oh how I love to ride on the fierce, foaming, bursting tide, where every mad wave drowns the moon, and whistles aloft its tempest tune, and tells how goeth the world below, and why the southwest wind doth blow. I never was on the dull tame shore, but I loved the great sea more and more, and backward flew to her billowy breast, like a bird that seeketh her mother's nest. And a mother she was and is to me, for I was born on the open sea. The waves were white, and red the morn in the noisy hour when I was born. The whale it whistled, the porpoise rolled, and the dolphins bared their backs of gold, and never was heard such an outcry wild as welcomed to life the ocean child. I have lived since then in calm and strife, full 50 summers a rover's life, with wealth to spend and a power to range, but never have sought or sighed for change. And death, whenever he comes to me, shall come on the wide, unbounded sea. Barry Cornwall. The sun does not shine for a few trees and flowers, but for the wide world's joy. The lonely pine upon the mountain top waves its sombre boughs and cries, "Thou art my sun." And the little meadow violet lifts its cup of blue and whispers with its perfumed breath, "Thou art my son." And the grain in 1,000 fields rustles in the wind and makes answer, "Thou art my son." And so God sits effulgent in heaven, not for a favored few, but for the universe of life, and there is no creature so poor or so low that he may not look up with childlike confidence and say, My Father, thou art mine. Henry Ward Beecher. The Lark. Bird of the wilderness, blithesome and cumberless, sweet be thy matin o'er moorland and lea. Emblem of happiness, blessed is thy dwelling place, O to abide in the desert with thee. Wild is thy lay and loud, far in the downy cloud, love gives it energy, love gave it birth. Where on thy dewy wing, where art thou journeying? Thy lay is in heaven, thy love is on earth. O'er fell and fountain sheen, o'er moor and mountain green, o'er the red streamer that heralds the day, over the cloudlet dim, over the rainbow's rim, musical cherub soar, singing away. Then when the gloaming comes, low in the heather blooms, sweet will thy welcome and bed of love be. Emblem of happiness, blessed is thy dwelling place, O to abide in the desert with thee. James Hogg. In joyous conversation there is an elastic touch, a delicate stroke upon the central ideas, generally following a pause. This elastic touch adds vivacity to the voice. If you try repeatedly, it can be sensed by feeling the tongue strike the teeth. The entire absence of elastic touch in the voice can be observed in the thick tongue of the intoxicated man. Try to talk with the tongue lying still in the bottom of the mouth, and you will obtain largely the same effect. Vivacity of utterance is gained by using the tongue to strike off the emphatic idea with a decisive, elastic touch. Deliver the following with decisive strokes on the emphatic ideas. Deliver it in a vivacious manner, noting the elastic touch action of the tongue. A flexible, responsive tongue is absolutely essential to good voice work. From Napoleon's address to the Directory on his return from Egypt. What have you done with that brilliant France which I left you? I left you at peace, and I find you at war. I left you victorious, and I find you defeated. I left you the millions of Italy, and I find only spoliation and poverty. What have you done with 100,000 Frenchmen, my companions in glory? They are dead. This state of affairs cannot last long. In less than 3 years, it would plunge us into despotism. Practice the following selection for the development of elastic touch. Say it in a joyous spirit, using the exercise to develop voice charm in all the ways suggested in this chapter. The Brook. I come from haunts of coot and hern, I make a sudden sally, and sparkle out among the fern, to bicker down a valley. By 30 hills I hurry down, or slip between the ridges, by 20 thorps, a little town, and 100 bridges, till last by Philip's farm I flow to join the brimming river. For men may come, and men may go, but I go on forever. I chatter over stony ways in little sharps and trebles, I bubble into eddying bays, I babble on the pebbles. With many a curve my banks I fret, by many a field and fallow, and many a fairy foreland set with willow weed and mallow. I chatter, chatter as I flow to join the brimming river, for men may come, and men may go, but I go on forever. I wind about, and in and out, with here a blossom sailing, and here and there a lusty trout, and here and there a grayling, and here and there a foamy flake upon me as I travel, with many a silvery water break above the golden gravel, and draw them all along and flow to join the brimming river, for men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. I steal by lawns and grassy plots, I slide by hazel covers, I move the sweet forget-me-nots that grow for happy lovers. I slip, I slide, I gloom, I glance among my skimming swallows. I make the netted sunbeam dance against my sandy shallows. I murmur under moon and stars in brambly wildernesses. I linger by my shingly bars. I loiter round my cresses. and out again I curve and flow to join the brimming river, for men may come, and men may go, but I go on forever. Alfred Tennyson. The children at play on the street, glad from sheer physical vitality, display a resonance and charm in their voices quite different from the voices that float through the silent halls of the hospitals. A skilled physician can tell much about his patient's condition from the mere sound of the voice. Failing health, or even physical weariness, tells through the voice. It is always well to rest, and be entirely refreshed before attempting to deliver a public address. As to health, neither scope nor space permits us to discuss here the laws of hygiene. There are many excellent books on this subject. In the reign of Roman Emperor Tiberius, one senator wrote to another, "To the wise, a word is sufficient." The apparel oft proclaims the man. The voice always does. It is one of the greatest revealers of character. The superficial woman, the brutish man, the reprobate, the person of culture often discloses inner nature in the voice, for even the cleverest dissembler cannot entirely prevent its tones and qualities being affected by the slightest change of thought or emotion. In anger it becomes high, harsh, and unpleasant. In love, low, soft, and melodious. The variations are as limitless as they are fascinating to observe. Visit a theatrical hotel in a large city, and listen to the buzzsaw voices of the chorus girls from some burlesque attraction. The explanation is simple. Buzzsaw lives. Emerson said, "When a man lives with God, his voice shall be as sweet as the murmur of the brook, or the rustle of the corn." It is impossible to think selfish thoughts and have either an attractive personality, a lovely character, or a charming voice. If you want to possess voice charm, cultivate a deep, sincere sympathy for mankind. Love will shine out through your eyes and proclaim itself in your tones. One secret of the sweetness of the canary's song may be his freedom from tainted thoughts. Your character beautifies or mars your voice. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is his voice. Questions and exercises. 1. Define A. Charm. B. Joy. C. Beauty. 2. Make a list of all the words related to joy. 3. Write a 3-minute eulogy of the joyful man. 4. Deliver it without the use of notes. Have you carefully considered all the qualities that go to make up voice charm in its delivery? 5. Tell briefly, in your own words, what means may be employed to develop a charming voice. 6. Discuss the effect of voice on character. 7. Discuss the effect of character on voice. 8. Analyze the voice charm of any speaker or singer you choose. 9. Analyze the defects of any given voice. 10. Make a short, humorous speech imitating certain voice defects, pointing out reasons. 11. Commit the following stanza and interpret each phrase of delight, suggested or expressed by the poet. An infant when it gazes on a light, a child the moment when it drains the breast, a devotee when soars the host in sight, an Arab with a stranger for a guest, a sailor when the prize has struck in fight, a miser filling his most hoarded chest, feel rapture, but not such true joy are reaping as they who watch o'er what they love while sleeping. Byron, Don Juan. End of section 13. Recording by Matthew Reese.
Section 14 of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bill Mosley. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 14. Distinctness and Precision of Utterance. In man speaks God. Hesiod, Words and Days. And endless are the modes of speech, and far extends from side to side the field of words. Homer, Iliad. In popular usage, the terms pronunciation, enunciation, and articulation are synonymous. But real pronunciation includes three distinct processes and may therefore be defined as the utterance of a syllable or a group of syllables with regard to articulation, accentuation, and enunciation. Distinct and precise utterance is one of the most important considerations of public speech. How preposterous it is to hear a speaker making sounds of inarticulate earnestness under the contented delusion that he is telling something to his audience. Telling means communicating. And how can he actually communicate without making every word distinct? Slovenly pronunciation results from either physical deformity or habit. A surgeon or a surgeon-dentist may correct a deformity, but your own will, working by self-observation and resolution in drill, will break a habit. All depends on whether you think it worthwhile. Defective speech is so widespread that freedom from it is the exception. It is painfully common to hear public speakers mutilate the King's English. If they do not actually murder it, as Curran once said, they often knock an I out, the letter I. A Canadian clergyman, writing in the Homiletic Review, relates that in his student days, quote, a classmate who was an Englishman supplied a country church for a Sunday. On the following Monday he conducted a missionary meeting. In the course of his address he said some farmers thought they were doing their duty toward missions when they gave their hods and hens to the work, but the Lord required more. At the close of the meeting, a young woman seriously said to a friend, I am sure the farmers do well if they give their hogs and hens to missions. It is more than most people can afford. It is insufferable effrontery for any man to appear before an audience who persists in driving the H out of happiness, home, and heaven, and to paraphrase Waldo Masaros, will not let it rest in hell. He who does not show enough self-knowledge to see in himself such glaring faults, nor enough self-mastery to correct them, has no business to instruct others. If he can do no better, he should be silent. If he will do no better, he should also be silent. Barring incurable physical defects, and few are incurable nowadays, the whole matter is one of will. The catalogue of those who have done the impossible by faithful work is as inspiring as a roll call of warriors. The less there is of you, says Nathan Shepherd, the more need for you to make the most of what there is of you. Articulation. Articulation is the forming and joining of the elementary sounds of speech. It seems an appalling task to utter articulately the third of 1,000,000 words that go to make up our English vocabulary. But the way to make a beginning is really simple. learn to utter correctly and with easy change from one to the other each of the 44 elementary sounds in our language. The reasons why articulation is so painfully slurred by a great many public speakers are 4: ignorance of the elemental sounds, failure to discriminate between sounds nearly alike, a slovenly, lazy use of the vocal organs, and a torpid will. Anyone who is still master of himself will know how to handle each of these defects. The vowel sounds are the most vexing source of errors, especially where diphthongs are found. Who has not heard such errors as are hit off in this inimitable verse by Oliver Wendell Holmes? Learning condemns beyond the reach of hope the careless lips that speak of sop for soap. Her edict exiles from her fair abode the clownish voice that utters rod for road. Less stern to him who calls his coat a caught, and steers his boat believing it a bought. She pardoned one, our classic city's boast, who said at Cambridge most instead of most, but knit her brows and stamped her angry foot to hear a teacher call a root a root. The foregoing examples are all monosyllables, but bad articulation is frequently the result of joining sounds that do not belong together. For example, no one finds it difficult to say beauty, but may persist in pronouncing duty as though it were spelled either duty or juty. It is not only from untaught speakers that we hear such slovenly articulations as column for column and pretty for pretty, but even great orators occasionally offend quite as unblushingly as less noted mortals. Nearly all such errors are of carelessness, not of pure ignorance, of carelessness, because the ear never tries to hear what the lips articulate. It must be exasperating to a foreigner to find that the elemental sound oo gives him no hint for the pronunciation of bow, cough, rough, thorough, and through. And we can well forgive even a man of culture who occasionally loses his way amidst the intricacies of English articulation. But there can be no excuse for the slovenly utterance of the simple vowel sounds which form at once the life and the beauty of our language. He who is too lazy to speak distinctly should hold his tongue. The consonant sounds occasion serious trouble only for those who do not look with care at the spelling of words about to be pronounced. Nothing but carelessness can account for saying Jacob Baptist Sevem always or satisfy. He that hath yaws to yaw, let him yaw, is the rendering which an Anglophobiac clergyman gave to the familiar scripture. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. After hearing the name of Sir Humphrey Davy pronounced, a Frenchman, who wished to write to the eminent Englishman, thus addressed the letter Sirum Fridavi. Accentuation. Accentuation is the stressing of the proper syllables in words. This it is that is properly called pronunciation. For instance, we properly say that a word is mispronounced when it is accented invite instead of invite, though it is really an offense against only one form of pronunciation, accentuation. It is the work of a lifetime to learn the accents of a large vocabulary, and to keep pace with changing usage. But an alert ear, the study of word origins, and the dictionary habit will prove to be mighty helpers in a task that can never be finally completed. Enunciation. Correct enunciation is the complete utterance of all the sounds of a syllable or a word. Wrong articulation gives the wrong sound to the vowel or vowels of a word or a syllable, as do for do, or unites two sounds improperly, as holy for holy. Wrong enunciation is the incomplete utterance of a syllable or a word, the sound omitted or added being usually consonantal. To say necessity instead of necessity is a wrong articulation. To say doin' for doing is improper enunciation. The one articulates, that is, joints, two sounds that should not be joined, and thus gives the word a positively wrong sound. The other fails to touch all the sounds in the word, and in that particular way also sounds the word incorrectly. My text may be found in the 5th and 6th verses of the 2nd chapter of Titus, and the subject of my discourse is the government of our homes. Footnote number 6. School and college speaker, Mitchell. What did this preacher do with his final consonants? This slovenly dropping of essential sounds is as offensive as the common habit of running words together so that they lose their individuality and distinctness. Light and dark, up and down, don't you know, particular, examination are all too common to need comment. Imperfect enunciation is due to lack of attention and to lazy lips. It can be corrected by resolutely attending to the formation of syllables as they are uttered. Flexible lips will enunciate difficult combinations of sounds without slighting any of them, but such flexibility cannot be attained except by habitually uttering words with distinctness and accuracy. A daily exercise in enunciating a series of sounds will in a short time give flexibility to the lips and alertness to the mind, so that no word will be uttered without receiving its due complement of sound. Returning to our definition, we see that when the sounds of a word are properly articulated, the right syllables accented, and full value given to each sound in its enunciation, we have correct pronunciation. Perhaps one word of caution is needed here, lest anyone anxious to bring out clearly every sound should overdo the matter and neglect the unity and smoothness of pronunciation. Be careful not to bring syllables into so much prominence as to make words seem long and angular. The joints must be kept decently dressed. Before delivery, do not fail to go over your manuscript and note every sound that may possibly be mispronounced. Consult the dictionary and make assurance doubly sure. If the arrangement of words is unfavorable to clear enunciation, change either words or order, and do not rest until you can follow Hamlet's directions to the players. Questions and exercises. 1. Practice repeating the following rapidly, paying particular attention to the consonants. Foolish Flavius, flushing feverishly, fiercely found fault with Flora's frivolity. Footnote number 7. School and college speaker, Mitchell. Mary's matchless mimicry makes much mischief. Seated on shining shale, she sells sea-shells. You youngsters yielded your youthful Yuletide yearnings yesterday. 2. Sound the L in each of the following words repeated in sequence. Blue black blinkers blocked black blondin's eyes. 3. Did you say a blue or a blue sky? 4. Compare the U sound in few and in new. Say each aloud and decide which is correct. New York, New York, or New York. 5. Pay careful heed to the directions of this chapter in reading the following from Hamlet. After the interview with the ghost of his father, Hamlet tells his friends Horatio and Marcellus that he intends to act a part. Horatio. O day and night, but this is wondrous strange. Hamlet. And therefore as a stranger give it welcome. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. But come, here as before, never, so help your mercy, how strange or odd soe'er I bear myself, as I perchance hereafter I shall think meet to put an antic disposition on, that you at such times seeing me never shall with arms encumbered thus, or this head shake, or by pronouncing of some doubtful phrase, as well, well, we know, or we could, and if we would, or if we list to speak, or there be an if there might, or such ambiguous giving out to note that you know aught of me. This not to do, so grace and mercy at your most need help you swear. Act 1, Scene 5. 6. Make a list of common errors of pronunciation, saying which are due to faulty articulation, wrong accentuation, and incomplete enunciation. In each case, make the correction. 7. Criticize any speech you may have heard which displayed these faults. 8. Explain how the false shame of seeming to be too precise may hinder us from cultivating perfect verbal utterance. 9. Overprecision is likewise a fault. To bring out any syllable unduly is to caricature the word. Be moderate in reading the following. The last speech of Maximilien de Robespierre. The enemies of the Republic call me tyrant. Were I such, they would grovel at my feet. I should gorge them with gold. I should grant them immunity for their crimes, and they would be grateful. Were I such, the kings we have vanquished, far from denouncing Robespierre, would lend me their guilty support. There would be a covenant between them and me. Tyranny must have tools. But the enemies of tyranny, whither does their path end? To the tomb and to immortality. What tyrant is my protector? To what faction do I belong? Yourselves. What faction, since the beginning of the Revolution, has crushed and annihilated so many detected traitors? You, the people, our principles, are that faction, a faction to which I am devoted and against which all the scoundrelism of the day is banded. The confirmation of the Republic has been my object, and I know that the Republic can be established only on the eternal basis of morality. Against me and against those who hold kindred principles the League is formed. My life? Oh, my life I abandon without a regret. I have seen the past, and I foresee the future. What friend of this country would wish to survive the moment when he could no longer serve it, when he could no longer defend innocence against oppression? Wherefore should I continue in an order of things where intrigue eternally triumphs over truth, where justice is mocked, where passions the most abject or fears the most absurd override the sacred interests of humanity? In witnessing the multitude of vices which the torrent of the Revolution has rolled in turbid communion with its civic virtues, I confess that I have sometimes feared that I should be sullied in the eyes of posterity by the impure neighborhood of unprincipled men who had thrust themselves into association with the sincere friends of humanity. And I rejoice that these conspirators against my country have now, by their reckless rage, traced deep the line of demarcation between themselves and all true men. Question history, and learn how all the defenders of liberty in all times have been overwhelmed by calumny, but their traducers died also. The good and the bad disappear alike from the earth, but in very different conditions. O Frenchmen, O my countrymen, let not your enemies, with their desolating doctrines, degrade your souls and enervate your virtues. No, Chalmette, no, death is not an eternal sleep. Citizens, efface from the tomb that motto, graven by sacrilegious hands, which spreads over all nature a funereal crape, takes from oppressed innocence its support, and affronts the beneficent dispensation of death. Inscribe rather thereon these words: Death is the commencement of immortality. I leave to the oppressors of the people a terrible testament, which I proclaim with the independence befitting one whose career is so nearly ended. It is the awful truth: thou shalt die. End of section 14. Recording by Bill Mosley, Frelsburg, Texas, USA.
Section 15 of The Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 15. The Truth About Gesture. When Whitefield acted an old blind man advancing by slow steps toward the edge of the precipice, Lord Chesterfield started up and cried, "Good God, he is gone!" Nathan Sheppard, Before an Audience. Gesture is really a simple matter that requires observation and common sense rather than a book of rules. Gesture is an outward expression of an inward condition. It is merely an effect, the effect of a mental or an emotional impulse struggling for expression through physical avenues. You must not, however, begin at the wrong end. If you are troubled by your gestures or a lack of gestures, attend to the cause, not the effect. It will not in the least help matters to tack on to your delivery a few mechanical movements. If the tree in your front yard is not growing to suit you, fertilize and water the soil and let the tree have sunshine. Obviously, it will not help your tree to nail on a few branches. If your cistern is dry, wait till it rains, or bore a well. Why plunge a pump into a dry hole? The speaker whose thoughts and emotions are welling within him like a mountain spring will not have much trouble to make gestures. It will be merely a question of properly directing them. If his enthusiasm for his subject is not such as to give him a natural impulse for dramatic action, it will avail nothing to furnish him with a long list of rules. He may tack on some movements, but they will look like the wilted branches nailed to a tree to simulate life. Gestures must be born, not built. A wooden horse may amuse the children, but it takes a live one to go somewhere. It is not only impossible to lay down definite rules on this subject, but it would be silly to try, for everything depends on the speech, the occasion, the personality and feelings of the speaker, and the attitude of the audience. It is easy enough to forecast the result of multiplying 7 by 6, but it is impossible to tell any man what kind of gestures he will be impelled to use when he wishes to show his earnestness. We may tell him that many speakers close the hand, with the exception of the forefinger, and pointing that finger straight at the audience pour out their thoughts like a volley; or that others stamp one foot for emphasis; or that Mr. Bryan often slaps his hands together for great force, holding one palm upward in an easy manner; or that Gladstone would sometimes make a rush at the clerk's table in Parliament and smite it with his hand so forcefully that Disraeli once brought down the House by grimly congratulating himself that such a barrier stood between himself and "the honourable gentleman." All these things, and a bookful more, may we tell the speaker, but we cannot know whether he can use these gestures or not, any more than we can decide whether he could wear Mr. Bryan's clothes. The best that can be done on this subject is to offer a few practical suggestions, and let personal good taste decide as to where effective dramatic action ends and extravagant motion begins. Any gesture that merely calls attention to itself is bad. The purpose of a gesture is to carry your thought and feeling into the minds and hearts of your hearers. This it does by emphasizing your message, by interpreting it, by expressing it in action, by striking its tone in either a physically descriptive, a suggestive, or a typical gesture, and let it be remembered all the time that gesture includes all physical movement, from facial expression and the tossing of the head to the expressive movements of hand and foot. A shifting of the pose may be a most effective gesture. What is true of gesture is true of all life. If the people on the street turn around and watch you walk, your walk is more important than you are. Change it. If the attention of your audience is called to your gestures, they are not convincing, because they appear to be, what they have a doubtful right to be in reality, studied. Have you ever seen a speaker use such grotesque gesticulations that you were fascinated by their frenzy of oddity, but could not follow his thought? Do not smother ideas with gymnastics. Savonarola would rush down from the high pulpit among the congregation in the Duomo at Florence and carry the fire of conviction to his hearers. Billy Sunday slides to base on the platform carpet in dramatizing one of his baseball illustrations. Yet in both instances the message has somehow stood out bigger than the gesture. It is chiefly in calm afterthought that men have remembered the form of dramatic expression. When Sir Henry Irving made his famous exit as Shylock, the last thing the audience saw was his pallid, avaricious hand extended skinny and claw-like against the background. At the time, everyone was overwhelmed by the tremendous typical quality of this gesture. Now we have time to think of its art and discuss its realistic power. Only when gesture is subordinated to the absorbing importance of the idea, a spontaneous, living expression of living truth, is it justifiable at all. and when it is remembered for itself, as a piece of unusual physical energy or as a poem of grace, it is a dead failure as dramatic expression. There is a place for a unique style of walking. It is the circus or the cakewalk. There is a place for surprisingly rhythmical evolutions of arms and legs. It is on the dance floor or the stage. Don't let your agility and grace put your thoughts out of business. One of the present writers took his first lessons in gesture from a certain college president who knew far more about what had happened at the Diet of Worms than he did about how to express himself in action. His instructions were to start the movement on a certain word, continue it on a precise curve, and unfold the fingers at the conclusion, ending with the forefinger, just so. Plenty, and more than plenty, has been published on this subject, giving just such silly directions. Gesture is a thing of mentality and feeling, not a matter of geometry. Remember, whenever a pair of shoes, a method of pronunciation, or a gesture calls attention to itself, it is bad. When you have made really good gestures in a good speech, your hearers will not go away saying, "What beautiful gestures he made!" But they will say, "I'll vote for that measure." "He is right. I believe in that." Gestures should be born of the moment. The best actors and public speakers rarely know in advance what gestures they are going to make. They make one gesture on certain words tonight, and none at all tomorrow night at the same point. Their various moods and interpretations govern their gestures. It is all a matter of impulse and intelligent feeling with them. Don't overlook that word, intelligent. Nature does not always provide the same kind of sunsets or snowflakes, and the movements of a good speaker vary almost as much as the creations of nature. Now all this is not to say that you must not take some thought for your gestures. If that were meant, why this chapter? When the sergeant despairingly besought the recruit in the awkward squad to step out and look at himself, he gave splendid advice, and worthy of personal application. Particularly while you are in the learning days of public speaking, you must learn to criticize your own gestures. Recall them, see where they were useless, crude, awkward, what not, and do better next time. There is a vast deal of difference between being conscious of self and being self-conscious. It will require your nice discrimination in order to cultivate spontaneous gestures and yet give due attention to practice. While you depend upon the moment, it is vital to remember that only a dramatic genius can effectively accomplish such feats as we have related of Whitefield, Savonarola, and others. And doubtless, the first time they were used, they came in a burst of spontaneous feeling. Yet Whitefield declared that not until he had delivered a sermon 40 times was its delivery perfected. What spontaneity initiates, let practice complete. Every effective speaker and every vivid actor has observed, considered, and practiced gesture until his dramatic actions are a subconscious possession, just like his ability to pronounce correctly without especially concentrating his thought. Every able platform man has possessed himself of a dozen ways in which he might depict in gesture any given emotion. In fact, the means for such expression are endless. And this is precisely why it is both useless and harmful to make a chart of gestures and enforce them as the ideals of what may be used to express this or that feeling. Practice descriptive, suggestive, and typical movements until they come as naturally as a good articulation, and rarely forecast the gestures you will use at a given moment. Leave everything to that moment. Avoid monotony in gesture. Roast beef is an excellent dish, but it would be terrible as an exclusive diet. No matter how effective one gesture is, do not overwork it. Put variety into your actions. Monotony will destroy all beauty and power. The pump handle makes one effective gesture, and on hot days that one is very eloquent, but it has its limitations. Any movement that is not significant weakens. Do not forget that. Restlessness is not expression. A great many useless movements will only take the attention of the audience from what you are saying. A widely noted man introduced the speaker of the evening one Sunday lately to a New York audience. The only thing remembered about that introductory speech is that the speaker played nervously with the covering of the table as he talked. We naturally watch moving objects. A janitor putting down a window can take the attention of the hearers from Mr. Roosevelt. By making a few movements at one side of the stage, a chorus girl may draw the interest of the spectators from a big scene between the leads. When our forefathers lived in caves, they had to watch moving objects, for movements meant danger. We have not yet overcome the habit. Advertisers have taken advantage of it. Witness the moving electric light signs in any city. A shrewd speaker will respect this law and conserve the attention of his audience by eliminating all unnecessary movements. Gesture should either be simultaneous with or precede the words, not follow them. Lady Macbeth says, "Bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue." Reverse this order and you get comedy. Say, "There he goes," pointing at him after you have finished your words, and see if the result is not comical. Do not make short, jerky movements. Some speakers seem to be imitating a waiter who has failed to get a tip. Let your movements be easy and from the shoulder, as a rule, rather than from the elbow. But do not go to the other extreme and make too many flowing motions. That savors of the lackadaisical. Put a little punch and life into your gestures. You cannot, however, do this mechanically. The audience will detect it if you do. They may not know just what is wrong, but the gesture will have a false appearance to them. Facial expression is important. Have you ever stopped in front of a Broadway theater and looked at the photographs of the cast? Notice the row of chorus girls who are supposed to be expressing fear. Their attitudes are so mechanical that the attempt is ridiculous. Notice the picture of the star expressing the same emotion. His muscles are drawn, his eyebrows lifted, he shrinks, and fear shines through his eyes. That actor felt fear when the photograph was taken. The chorus girls felt that it was time for a rare bit, and more nearly expressed that emotion than they did fear. Incidentally, that is one reason why they stay in the chorus. The movements of the facial muscles may mean a great deal more than the movements of the hand. The man who sits in a dejected heap with a look of despair on his face is expressing his thoughts and feelings just as effectively as the man who is waving his arms and shouting from the back of a dray wagon. The eye has been called the window of the soul. Through it shines the light of our thoughts and feelings. Do not use too much gesture. As a matter of fact, in the big crises of life we do not go through many actions. When your closest friend dies, you do not throw up your hands and talk about your grief. You are more likely to sit and brood in dry-eyed silence. The Hudson River does not make much noise on its way to the sea. It is not half so loud as the little creek up in Bronx Park that a bullfrog could leap across. The barking dog never tears your trousers. At least they say he doesn't. Do not fear the man who waves his arms and shouts his anger, but the man who comes up quietly with eyes flaming and face burning may knock you down. Fuss is not force. Observe these principles in nature and practice them in your delivery. The writer of this chapter once observed an instructor drilling a class in gesture. They had come to the passage from Henry VIII in which the humbled cardinal says, "Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness." It is one of the pathetic passages of literature. A man uttering such a sentiment would be crushed, and the last thing on earth he would do would be to make flamboyant movements. Yet this class had an elocutionary manual before them that gave an appropriate gesture for every occasion, from paying the gas bill to deathbed farewells. So they were instructed to throw their arms out at full length on each side and say, "Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness." Such a gesture might possibly be used in an after-dinner speech at the convention of a telephone company whose lines extended from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but to think of Wolsey's using that movement would suggest that his fate was just. Posture. The physical attitude to be taken before the audience really is included in gesture. Just what that attitude should be depends, not on rules, but on the spirit of the speech and the occasion. Senator La Follette stood for 3 hours with his weight thrown on his forward foot as he leaned out over the footlights, ran his fingers through his hair, and flamed out a denunciation of the trusts. It was very effective. But imagine a speaker taking that kind of position to discourse on the development of road-making machinery. If you have a fiery, aggressive message, and will let yourself go, nature will naturally pull your weight to your forward foot. A man in a hot political argument or a street brawl never has to stop to think upon which foot he should throw his weight. You may sometimes place your weight on your back foot if you have a restful and calm message. But don't worry about it. Just stand like a man who genuinely feels what he is saying. Do not stand with your heels close together like a soldier or a butler. No more should you stand with them wide apart like a traffic policeman. Use simple good manners and common sense. Here a word of caution is needed. We have advised you to allow your gestures and postures to be spontaneous and not woodenly prepared beforehand, but do not go to the extreme of ignoring the importance of acquiring mastery of your physical movements. A muscular hand made flexible by free movement is far more likely to be an effective instrument in gesture than a stiff, pudgy bunch of fingers. If your shoulders are lithe and carried well, while your chest does not retreat from association with your chin, the chances of using good extemporaneous gestures are so much the better. Learn to keep the back of your neck touching your collar, hold your chest high, and keep down your waist measure. So attention to strength, poise, flexibility, and grace of body are the foundations of good gesture, for they are expressions of vitality, and without vitality no speaker can enter the kingdom of power. When an awkward giant like Abraham Lincoln rose to the sublimest heights of oratory, he did so because of the greatness of his soul. His very ruggedness of spirit and artless honesty were properly expressed in his gnarly body. The fire of character, of earnestness, and of message swept his hearers before him when the tepid words of an insincere Apollo would have left no effect. But be sure you are a second Lincoln before you despise the handicap of physical awkwardness. Ty Cobb has confided to the public that when he was in a batting slump he even stands before a mirror, bat in hand, to observe the swing and follow-through of his batting form. If you would learn to stand well before an audience, look at yourself in a mirror, but not too often. Practice walking and standing before the mirror, so as to conquer awkwardness, not to cultivate a pose. Stand on the platform in the same easy manner that you would use before guests in a drawing-room. If your position is not graceful, make it so by dancing, gymnasium work, and by getting grace and poise in your mind. Do not continually hold the same position. Any big change of thought necessitates a change of position. Be at home. There are no rules, it is all a matter of taste. While on the platform, forget that you have any hands until you desire to use them. Then remember them effectively. Gravity will take care of them. Of course, if you want to put them behind you or fold them once in a while, it is not going to ruin your speech. Thought and feeling are the big things in speaking, not the position of a foot or a hand. Simply put your limbs where you want them to be. You have a will, so do not neglect to use it. Let us reiterate, do not despise practice. Your gestures and movements may be spontaneous and still be wrong. No matter how natural they are, it is possible to improve them. It is impossible for anyone, even yourself, to criticize your gestures until after they are made. You can't prune a peach tree until it comes up. Therefore speak much, and observe your own speech. While you are examining yourself, do not forget to study statuary and paintings to see how the great portrayers of nature have made their subjects express ideas through action. Notice the gestures of the best speakers and actors. Observe the physical expression of life everywhere. The leaves on the tree respond to the slightest breeze. The muscles of your face, the light of your eyes, should respond to the slightest change of feeling. Emerson says, "Every man that I meet is my superior in some way. In that I learn of him." Illiterate Italians make gestures so wonderful and beautiful that Booth or Barrett might have sat at their feet and been instructed. Open your eyes. Emerson says again, "We are immersed in beauty, but our eyes have no clear vision." Toss this book to one side. Go out and watch one child plead with another for a bite of apple. See a street brawl. Observe life in action. Do you want to know how to express victory? Watch the victor's hands go high on election night. Do you want to plead a cause? Make a composite photograph of all the pleaders in daily life you constantly see. Beg, borrow, and steal the best you can get, but don't give it out as theft. Assimilate it until it becomes a part of you. Then let the expression come out. Questions and exercises. 1. From what source do you intend to study gesture? 2. What is the first requisite of good gestures? Why? 3. Why is it impossible to lay down steel-clad rules for gesturing? 4. Describe a graceful gesture that you have observed, b. a forceful one, c. an extravagant one, d. an inappropriate one. 5. What gestures do you use for emphasis? Why? 6. How can grace of movement be acquired? 7. When in doubt about a gesture, what would you do? 8. What, according to your observations before a mirror, are your faults in gesturing? 9. How do you intend to correct them? 10. What are some of the gestures, if any, that you might use in delivering Thurston's speech, page 50, Grady's speech, page 36? Be specific. 11. Describe some particularly appropriate gesture that you have observed. Why was it appropriate? 12. Cite at least 3 movements in nature that might well be imitated in gesture. 13. What would you gather from the expressions descriptive gesture, suggestive gesture, and typical gesture? 14. Select any elemental emotion, such as fear, and try, by picturing in your mind at least 5 different situations that might call forth this emotion, to express its several phases by gesture, including posture, movement, and facial expression. 15. Do the same thing for such other emotions as you may select. 16. Select 3 passages from any source, only being sure that they are suitable for public delivery, memorize each, and then devise gestures suitable for each. Say why. 17. Criticize the gestures in any speech you have heard recently. 18. Practice flexible movement of the hand. What exercises did you find useful? 19. Carefully observe some animal, then devise several typical gestures. 20. Write a brief dialogue between any 2 animals. Read it aloud and invent expressive gestures. 21. Deliver with appropriate gestures the quotation that heads this chapter. 22. Read aloud the following incident using dramatic gestures. Quote, "When Voltaire was preparing a young actress to appear in one of his tragedies, he tied her hands to her sides with pack-thread in order to check her tendency toward exuberant gesticulation. Under this condition of compulsory immobility she commenced to rehearse, and for some time she bore herself calmly enough. But at last, completely carried away by her feelings, she burst her bonds and flung up her arms. Alarmed at her supposed neglect of his instructions, she began to apologize to the poet. He smilingly reassured her, however. The gesture was then admirable, because it was irrepressible." End quote. Redway, The Actor's Art. 23. Render the following with suitable gestures. "One day, while preaching, Whitefield suddenly assumed a nautical air and manner that were irresistible with him," and broke forth in these words, "Well, my boys, we have a clear sky and are making fine headway over a smooth sea before a light breeze, and we shall soon lose sight of land. But what means this sudden lowering of the heavens, and that dark cloud arising from beneath the western horizon? Hark! Don't you hear distant thunder? Don't you see those flashes of lightning? There is a storm gathering. Every man to his duty. The air is dark, the tempest rages. Our masts are gone. The ship is on her beam ends. What next?" At this, a number of sailors in the congregation, utterly swept away by the dramatic description, leaped to their feet and cried, "The longboat! Take to the longboat!" Nathan Shepard, Before an Audience. End of section 15. Recording by Trisha G.
Section 16 of The Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bill Mosley. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 16. Chapter 16. Methods of Delivery. The crown, the consummation of the discourse is its delivery. Toward it all preparation looks. For it the audience waits. By it the speaker is judged. All the forces of the orator's life converge in his oratory. The logical acuteness with which he marshals the facts around his theme, the rhetorical facility with which he orders his language, the control to which he has attained in the use of his body as a single organ of expression, whatever richness of acquisition and experience are his, these are all now incidents. The fact is the sending of his message home to his hearers. The hour of delivery is the supreme inevitable hour for the orator. It is this fact that makes lack of adequate preparation such an impertinence, and it is this that sends such thrills of indescribable joy through the orator's whole being when he has achieved a success. It is like the mother forgetting her pangs for the joy of bringing a son into the world. J.B.E. How to Attract and Hold an Audience. There are 4 fundamental methods of delivering an address. All others are modifications of one or more of these: reading from manuscript, committing the written speech and speaking from memory, speaking from notes, and extemporaneous speech. It is impossible to say which form of delivery is best for all speakers in all circumstances. In deciding for yourself, you should consider the occasion, the nature of the audience, the character of your subject, and your own limitations of time and ability. However, it is worth while warning you not to be lenient in self-exaction. Say to yourself courageously, "What others can do, I can attempt." A bold spirit conquers where others flinch, and a trying task challenges pluck. Reading from manuscript. This method really deserves short shrift in a book on public speaking, for, delude yourself as you may, public reading is not public speaking. Yet there are so many who grasp this broken reed for support that we must here discuss the read speech, apologetic misnomer as it is. Certainly there are occasions, among them the opening of Congress, the presentation of a sore question before a deliberative body, or a historical commemoration, when it may seem not alone to the orator, but to all those interested, that the chief thing is to express certain thoughts in precise language, in language that must not be either misunderstood or misquoted. At such times, oratory is unhappily elbowed to a back bench. The manuscript is solemnly withdrawn from the capacious inner pocket of the new frock coat, and every one settles himself resignedly, with only a feeble flicker of hope that the so-called speech may not be as long as it is thick. The words may be golden, but the hearer's eyes are prone to be leaden, and in about one instance out of 100 does the perpetrator really deliver an impressive address. His excuse is his apology. He is not to be blamed, as a rule, for someone decreed that it would be dangerous to cut loose from manuscript moorings and take his audience with him on a really delightful sail. One great trouble on such great occasions is that the essayist, for such he is, has been chosen not because of his speaking ability, but because his grandfather fought in a certain battle, or his constituents sent him to Congress, or his gifts in some line of endeavor other than speaking have distinguished him. As well choose a surgeon from his ability to play golf. To be sure, it always interests an audience to see a great man. Because of his eminence, they are likely to listen to his words with respect, perhaps with interest, even when droned from a manuscript. But how much more effective such a deliverance would be if the papers were cast aside! Nowhere is the read address so common as in the pulpit. The pulpit, that in these days least of all can afford to invite a handicap. Doubtless many clergymen prefer finish to fervor. Let them choose. They are rarely men who sway the masses to acceptance of their message. What they gain in precision and elegance of language, they lose in force. There are just 4 motives that can move a man to read his address or sermon. 1. Laziness is the commonest. Enough said. Even heaven cannot make a lazy man efficient. 2. A memory so defective that he really cannot speak without reading. Alas, he is not speaking when he is reading, so his dilemma is painful, and not to himself alone. But no man has a right to assume that his memory is utterly bad until he has buckled down to memory culture and failed. A weak memory is oftener an excuse than a reason. 3. A genuine lack of time to do more than write the speech. There are such instances, but they do not occur every week. The disposition of your time allows more flexibility than you realize. Motive 3 too often harnesses up with motive 1. 4. A conviction that the speech is too important to risk forsaking the manuscript. But if it is vital that every word should be so precise, the style so polished, and the thoughts so logical, that the preacher must write a sermon entire, is not the message important enough to warrant extra effort in perfecting its delivery? It is an insult to a congregation, and disrespectful to Almighty God, to put the phrasing of a message above the message itself. To reach the hearts of the hearers, the sermon must be delivered. It is only half delivered when the speaker cannot utter it with original fire and force, when he merely repeats words that were conceived hours or weeks before, and hence are like champagne that has lost its fizz. The reading preacher's eyes are tied down to his manuscript. He cannot give the audience the benefit of his expression. How long would a play fill a theater if the actors held their cue books in hand and read their parts? Imagine Patrick Henry reading his famous speech, Peter the Hermit, manuscript in hand, exhorting the Crusaders, Napoleon constantly looking at his papers, addressing the army at the pyramids, or Jesus reading the Sermon on the Mount. These speakers were so full of their subjects, their general preparation had been so richly adequate, that there was no necessity for a manuscript, either to refer to or to serve as an outward and visible sign of their preparedness. No event was ever so dignified that it required an artificial attempt at speech-making. Call an essay by its right name, but never call it a speech. Perhaps the most dignified of events is a supplication to the Creator. If you ever listened to the reading of an original prayer, you must have felt its superficiality. Regardless of what the theories may be about manuscript delivery, the fact remains that it does not work out with efficiency. Avoid it whenever at all possible. Committing the written speech and speaking from memory. This method has certain points in its favor. If you have time and leisure, it is possible to polish and rewrite your ideas until they are expressed in clear, concise terms. Pope sometimes spent a whole day in perfecting one couplet. Gibbon consumed 20 years gathering material for and rewriting the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Although you cannot devote such painstaking preparation to a speech, you should take time to eliminate useless words, crowd whole paragraphs into a sentence, and choose proper illustrations. Good speeches, like plays, are not written, they are rewritten. The National Cash Register Company follows this plan with their most efficient selling organization. They require their salesmen to memorize verbatim a selling talk. They maintain that there is one best way of putting their selling arguments, and they insist that each salesman use this ideal way rather than employ any haphazard phrases that may come to his mind at the moment. The method of writing and committing has been adopted by many noted speakers. Julius Caesar, Robert Ingersoll, and on some occasions Wendell Phillips were distinguished examples. The wonderful effects achieved by some famous actors were, of course, accomplished through the delivery of memorized lines. The inexperienced speaker must be warned before attempting this method of delivery that it is difficult and trying. It requires much skill to make it efficient. The memorized lines of the young speaker will usually sound like memorized words and repel. If you want to hear an example, listen to a department store demonstrator repeat her memorized lingo about the newest furniture polish or breakfast food. It requires training to make a memorized speech sound fresh and spontaneous, and unless you have a fine native memory, in each instance the finished product necessitates much labor. Should you forget a part of your speech or miss a few words, you are liable to be so confused that, like Mark Twain's guide in Rome, you will be compelled to repeat your lines from the beginning. On the other hand, you may be so taken up with trying to recall your written words that you will not abandon yourself to the spirit of your address, and so fail to deliver it with that spontaneity which is so vital to forceful delivery. But do not let these difficulties frighten you. If committing seems best to you, give it a faithful trial. Do not be deterred by its pitfalls, but by resolute practice avoid them. One of the best ways to rise superior to these difficulties is to do as Dr. Wallace Radcliffe often does, commit without writing the speech, making practically all the preparation mentally, without putting pen to paper. A laborious but effective way of cultivating both mind and memory. You will find it excellent practice, both for memory and delivery, to commit the specimen speeches found in this volume and declaim them, with all attention to the principles we have put before you. William Ellery Channing, himself a distinguished speaker, years ago had this to say of practice in declamation: "Is there not an amusement, having an affinity with the drama, which might be usefully introduced among us? I mean recitation, a work of genius, recited by a man of fine taste, enthusiasm, and powers of elocution, is a very pure and high gratification. Were this art cultivated and encouraged, great numbers, now insensible to the most beautiful compositions, might be waked up to their excellence and power." Speaking from notes. The third and most popular method of delivery is probably also the best one for the beginner. Speaking from notes is not ideal delivery, but we learn to swim in shallow water before going out beyond the ropes. Make a definite plan for your discourse. For a fuller discussion, see Chapter 18. And set down the points somewhat in the fashion of a lawyer's brief or a preacher's outline. Here is a sample of very simple notes. Attention. Roman numeral 1. Introduction. Attention indispensable to the performance of any great work. Anecdote. Roman numeral 2. Defined and illustrated. Arabic 1. From common observation. Arabic 2. From the lives of great men. Carlyle, Robert E. Lee. Roman numeral 3. Its relation to other mental powers. Arabic 1. Reason. Arabic 2. Imagination. Arabic 3. Memory. Arabic 4. Will. Anecdote. Roman numeral 4. Attention may be cultivated. Arabic 1. Involuntary attention. Arabic 2. Voluntary attention. Examples. Roman numeral 5. Conclusion. The consequences of inattention and of attention. Few briefs would be so precise as this one, for with experience a speaker learns to use little tricks to attract his eye. He may underscore a catchword heavily, draw a red circle around a pivotal idea, enclose the keyword of an anecdote in a wavy-lined box, and so on indefinitely. These points are worth remembering, for nothing so eludes the swift glancing eye of the speaker as the sameness of typewriting, or even a regular pen script. So unintentional a thing as a blot on the page may help you to remember a big point in your brief, perhaps by association of ideas. An inexperienced speaker would probably require fuller notes than the specimen given. Yet that way lies danger, for the complete manuscript is but a short remove from the copious outline. Use as few notes as possible. They may be necessary for the time being, but do not fail to look upon them as a necessary evil. And even when you lay them before you, refer to them only when compelled to do so. Make your notes as full as you please in preparation, but by all means condense them for platform use. Extemporaneous speech. Surely this is the ideal method of delivery. It is far and away the most popular with the audience, and the favorite method of the most efficient speakers. Extemporaneous speech has sometimes been made to mean unprepared speech, and indeed it is too often precisely that. But in no such sense do we recommend it strongly to speakers old and young. On the contrary, to speak well without notes requires all the preparation which we discussed so fully in the chapter on Fluency, while yet relying upon the inspiration of the hour for some of your thoughts and much of your language. You had better remember, however, that the most effective inspiration of the hour is the inspiration you yourself bring to it, bottled up in your spirit and ready to infuse itself into the audience. If you extemporize, you can get much closer to your audience. In a sense, they appreciate the task you have before you and send out their sympathy. Extemporize, and you will not have to stop and fumble around amidst your notes. You can keep your eye afire with your message and hold your audience with your very glance. You yourself will feel their response as you read the effects of your warm, spontaneous words written on their countenances. Sentences written out in the study are liable to be dead and cold when resurrected before the audience. When you create as you speak, you conserve all the native fire of your thought. You can enlarge on one point or omit another, just as the occasion or the mood of the audience may demand. It is not possible for every speaker to use this, the most difficult of all methods of delivery, and least of all can it be used successfully without much practice. But it is the ideal towards which all should strive. One danger in this method is that you may be led aside from your subject into bypaths. To avoid this peril, firmly stick to your mental outline. Practice speaking from a memorized brief until you gain control. Join a debating society. Talk, 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 and always extemporize. You may make a fool of yourself once or twice, but is that too great a price to pay for success? Notes, like crutches, are only a sign of weakness. Remember that the power of your speech depends to some extent upon the view your audience holds of you. General Grant's words as president were more powerful than his words as a Missouri farmer. If you would appear in the light of an authority, be one. Make notes on your brain instead of on paper. Joint methods of delivery. A modification of the second method has been adopted by many great speakers, particularly lecturers who are compelled to speak on a wide variety of subjects day after day. Such speakers often commit their addresses to memory, but keep their manuscripts in flexible book form before them, turning several pages at a time. They feel safer for having a sheet anchor to windward. But it is an anchor nevertheless, and hinders rapid, free sailing, though it drag never so slightly. Other speakers throw out a little lighter anchor by keeping before them a rather full outline of their written and committed speech. Others again write and commit a few important parts of the address, the introduction, the conclusion, some vital argument, some pat illustration, and depend on the hour for the language of the rest. This method is well adapted to speaking either with or without notes. Some speakers read from manuscript the most important parts of their speeches and utter the rest extemporaneously. Thus, what we have called joint methods of delivery are open to much personal variation. You must decide for yourself which is best for you, for the occasion, for your subject, for your audience. For these four factors all have their individual claims. Whatever form you choose, do not be so weakly indifferent as to prefer the easy way. Choose the best way, whatever it costs you in time and effort. And of this, be assured, only the practiced speaker can hope to gain both conciseness of argument and conviction in manner, polish of language and power in delivery, finish of style and fire in utterance. Questions and exercises. 1. Which in your judgment is the most suitable of delivery for you? Why? 2. What objections can you offer to A. Memorizing the entire speech, B. Reading from manuscript, C. Using notes, D. Speaking from memorized outline or notes, E. Any of the joint methods? 3. What is there to commend in delivering a speech in any of the foregoing methods? 4. Can you suggest any combination of methods that you have found efficacious? 5. What methods, according to your observation, do most successful speakers use? 6. Select some topic from the list at the end of Chapter 11. Narrow the theme so as to make it specific, and deliver a short address utilizing the four methods mentioned in four different deliveries of the speech. 7. Select one of the joint methods and apply it to the delivery of the same address. 8. Which method do you prefer and why? 9. From the list of subjects in the appendix, select a theme and deliver a 5-minute address without notes, but make careful preparation without putting your thoughts on paper. Note: it is earnestly hoped that instructors will not pass this stage of the work without requiring of their students much practice in the delivery of original speeches, in the manner that seems, after some experiment, to be best suited to the student's gifts. Students who are studying alone should be equally exacting in demand upon themselves. One point is most important. It is easy to learn to read a speech. Therefore, it is much more urgent that the pupil should have much practice in speaking from notes and speaking without notes. At this stage, pay more attention to manner than to matter. The succeeding chapters take up the composition of the address. Be particularly insistent upon frequent and thorough review of the principles of delivery discussed in the preceding chapters. End of section 16. Recording by Bill Mosley, Frelsburg, Texas, USA.
Section 17 of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joe Mabry. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 17. Chapter 17. Thought and Reserve Power. Providence is always on the side of the last reserve. Napoleon Bonaparte. So mightiest powers by deepest calms are fed, and sleep how oft in the things that gentlest be. Barry Cornwall, The Sea in Calm. What would happen if you should overdraw your bank account? As a rule, the check would be protested, but if you were on friendly terms with the bank, your check might be honored, and you would be called upon to make good the overdraft. Nature has no such favorites, therefore extends no credits. She is as relentless as a gasoline tank. When the gas is all used, the machine stops. It is as reckless for a speaker to risk going before an audience without having something in reserve as it is for the motorist to essay a long journey in the wilds without enough gasoline in sight. But in what does a speaker's reserve power consist? In a well-founded reliance on his general and particular grasp of his subject, in the quality of being alert and resourceful in thought, particularly in the ability to think while on his feet, and in that self-possession which makes one the captain of all his own forces, bodily and mental. The first of these elements, adequate preparation, and the last, self-reliance, were discussed fully in the chapters on self-confidence and fluency, so they will be touched only incidentally here. Besides, the next chapter will take up specific methods of preparation for public speaking. Therefore, the central theme of this chapter is the second of the elements of reserve power, thought. The mental storehouse. An empty mind, like an empty larder, may be a serious matter or not. All will depend on the available resources. If there is no food in the cupboard, the housewife does not nervously rattle the empty dishes. She telephones the grocer. If you have no ideas, do not rattle your empty ers and ahs, but get some ideas, and don't speak until you do get them. This, however, is not being what the old New England housekeeper used to call forehanded. The real solution of the problem of what to do with an empty head is never to let it become empty. In the artesian wells of Dakota, the water rushes to the surface and leaps a score of feet above the ground. The secret of this exuberant flow is of course the great supply below, crowding to get out. What is the use of stopping to prime a mental pump when you can fill your life with the resources for an artesian well? It is not enough to have merely enough. You must have more than enough. Then the pressure of your mass of thought and feeling will maintain your flow of speech and give you the confidence and poise that denote reserve power. To be away from home with only the exact return fare leaves a great deal to circumstances. Reserve power is magnetic. It does not consist in giving the idea that you are holding something in reserve, but rather in the suggestion that the audience is getting the cream of your observation, reading, experience, feeling, thought. To have reserve power, therefore, you must have enough milk of material on hand to supply sufficient cream. But how shall we get the milk? There are two ways. The one is first-hand, from the cow. The other is second-hand, from the milkman. The seeing eye. Some sage has said, "For 1,000 men who can speak, there is only one who can think. For 1,000 men who can think, there is only one who can see." To see and to think is to get your milk from your own cow. When the one man in a million who can see comes along, we call him master. Old Mr. Holbrook, of Cranford, asked his guest what color ash buds were in March. She confessed she did not know, to which the old gentleman answered, "I knew you didn't." "No more did I, an old fool that I am, till this young man comes and tells me. Black as ash buds in March, and I've lived all my life in the country. More shame for me not to know. Black, they are jet black, madam." This young man, referred to by Mr. Holbrook, was Tennyson. Henry Ward Beecher said, quote, "I do not believe that I have ever met a man on the street that I did not get from him some element for a sermon. I never see anything in nature which does not work towards that for which I give the strength of my life. The material for my sermons is all the time following me and swarming up around me." End quote. Instead of saying only one man in a million can see, it would strike nearer the truth to say that none of us sees with perfect understanding more than a fraction of what passes before our eyes. Yet this faculty of acute and accurate observation is so important that no man ambitious to lead can neglect it. The next time you are in a car, look at those who sit opposite you and see what you can discover of their habits, occupations, ideals, nationalities, environments, education, and so on. You may not see a great deal the first time, but practice will reveal astonishing results. Transmute every incident of your day into a subject for a speech or an illustration. Translate all that you see into terms of speech. When you can describe all that you have seen in definite words, you are seeing clearly. You are becoming the millionth man. De Maupassant's description of an author should also fit the public speaker. Quote, "His eye is like a suction pump, absorbing everything, like a pickpocket's hand, always at work. Nothing escapes him. He is constantly collecting material, gathering up glances, gestures, intentions, everything that goes on in his presence, the slightest look, the least act, the merest trifle." End quote. De Maupassant was himself a millionth man, a master. Ruskin took a common rock crystal and saw hidden within its stolid heart lessons which have not yet ceased to move men's lives. Beecher stood for hours before the window of a jewelry store, thinking out analogies between jewels and the souls of men. Gough saw in a single drop of water enough truth wherewith to quench the thirst of 5,000 souls. Thoreau sat so still in the shadowy woods that birds and insects came and opened up their secret lives to his eye. Emerson observed the soul of a man so long that at length he could say, "I cannot hear what you say, foreseeing what you are." Prior, for 3 years, studied the life of his babe, and so became an authority upon the child mind. Observation! Most men are blind. There are 1,000 times as many hidden truths and undiscovered facts about us today as have made discoverers famous, facts waiting for someone to pluck out the heart of their mystery. But so long as men go about the search with eyes that see not, so long will these hidden pearls lie in their shells. Not an orator, but who could more effectively point and feather his shafts were he to search nature rather than libraries? Too few can see sermons in stones and books in the running brooks, because they are so used to seeing merely sermons in books and only stones in running brooks. Sir Philip Sidney had a saying, "Look in thy heart and write." Massillon explained his astute knowledge of the human heart by saying, "I learned it by studying myself." Byron says of John Locke that all his knowledge of the human understanding was derived from studying his own mind. Since multiform nature is all about us, originality ought not to be so rare. How to Attract and Hold an Audience, J. Berg Esenwein. The Thinking Mind. Thinking is doing mental arithmetic with facts. Add this fact to that, and you reach a certain conclusion. Subtract this truth from another, and you have a definite result. Multiply this fact by another, and have a precise product. See how many times this occurrence happens in that space of time, and you have reached a calculable dividend. In thought processes, you perform every known problem of arithmetic and algebra. That is why mathematics are such excellent mental gymnastics. But by the same token, thinking is work. Thinking takes energy. Thinking requires time, and patience, and broad information, and clear-headedness. Beyond a miserable little surface scratching, few people really think at all. Only 1 in 1,000, according to the pundit already quoted. So long as the present system of education prevails, and children are taught through the ear rather than through the eye, so long as they are expected to remember thoughts of others rather than think for themselves, this proportion will continue. 1 man in 1,000,000 will be able to see, and 1 in 1,000 to think. But however thoughtless a mind has been, there is promise of better things so soon as the mind detects its own lack of thought power. The first step is to stop regarding thought as the magic of the mind, to use Byron's expression, and see it as thought truly is, a weighing of ideas and a placing of them in relationships to each other. Ponder this definition and see if you have learned to think efficiently. Habitual thinking is just that, A habit. Habit comes of doing a thing repeatedly. The lower habits are acquired easily. The higher ones require deeper grooves if they are to persist. So we find that the thought habit comes only with resolute practice. Yet no effort will yield richer dividends. Persist in practice, and whereas you have been able to think only an inch deep into a subject, you will soon find that you can penetrate it a foot. Perhaps this homely metaphor will suggest how to begin the practice of consecutive thinking, by which we mean welding a number of separate thought links into a chain that will hold. Take one link at a time, see that each naturally belongs with the ones you link to it, and remember that a single missing link means no chain. Thinking is the most fascinating and exhilarating of all mental exercises. Once realize that your opinion on a subject does not represent the choice you have made between what Dr. Cerebrum has written and Professor Cerebellum has said, but is the result of your own earnestly applied brain energy, and you will gain a confidence in your ability to speak on that subject that nothing will be able to shake. Your thought will have given you both power and reserve power. Someone has condensed the relation of thought to knowledge in these pungent, homely lines. Don't give me the man who thinks he thinks. Don't give me the man who thinks he knows. But give me the man who knows he thinks, and I have the man who knows he knows. Reading as a stimulus to thought. No matter how dry the cow, however, nor how poor our ability to milk, there is still the milkman. We can read what others have seen and felt and thought. Often, indeed, such records will kindle within us that pre-essential and vital spark, the desire to be a thinker. The following selection is taken from one of Dr. Newell Dwight Hillis's lectures, as given in A Man's Value to Society. Dr. Hillis is a most fluent speaker. He never refers to notes. He has reserve power. His mind is a veritable treasure house of facts and ideas. See how he draws from a knowledge of 15 different general or special subjects: geology, plant life, Palestine, chemistry, Eskimos, mythology, literature, the Nile, history, law, wit, evolution, religion, biography, and electricity. Surely it needs no sage to discover that the secret of this man's reserve power is the old secret of our artesian well whose abundance surges from unseen depths. The uses of books and reading. Used by permission. Each Kingsley approaches a stone as a jeweler approaches a casket to unlock the hidden gems. Geikie causes the bit of hard coal to unroll the juicy bud, the thick odorous leaves, the pungent boughs, until the bit of carbon enlarges into the beauty of a tropic forest. That little book of Grant Allen's, called How Plants Grow, exhibits trees and shrubs as eating, drinking, and marrying. We see certain date groves in Palestine, and other date groves in the desert 100 miles away, and the pollen of the one carried upon the trade winds to the branches of the other. We see the tree with its strange system of waterworks pumping the sap up through pipes and mains. We see the chemical laboratory in the branches mixing flavor for the orange in one bough, mixing the juices of the pineapple in another. We behold the tree as a mother making each infant acorn ready against the long winter, rolling it in swaths soft and warm as wool blankets, wrapping it around with garments impervious to the rain, and finally slipping the infant acorn into a sleeping bag, like those the Eskimos gave Dr. Kane. At length we come to feel that the Greeks were not far wrong in thinking each tree had a dryad in it, animating it, protecting it against destruction, dying when the tree withered. Some Faraday shows us that each drop of water is a sheath for electrical forces sufficient to charge 800,000 Leyden jars, or drive an engine from Liverpool to London. Some Sir William Thomson tells us how hydrogen gas will chew up a large iron spike as a child's molars will chew off the end of a stick of candy. Thus each new book opens up some new and hitherto unexplored realm of nature. Thus books fulfill for us the legend of the wondrous glass that showed its owner all things distant and all things hidden. Through books our world becomes as a bud from the bower of God's beauty, the sun as a spark from the light of his wisdom, the sky as a bubble on the sea of his power. Therefore Mrs. Browning's words, "No child can be called fatherless who has God and his mother. No youth can be called friendless who has God and the companionship of good books." Books also advantage us in that they exhibit the unity of progress, the solidarity of the race, and the continuity of history. Authors lead us back along the pathway of law, of liberty or religion, and set us down in front of the great man in whose brain the principle had its rise. As the discoverer leads us from the mouth of the Nile back to the headwaters of Nyanza, so books exhibit great ideas and institutions, as they move forward, ever widening and deepening, like some Nile feeding many civilizations. For all the reforms of today go back to some reform of yesterday. Man's art goes back to Athens and Thebes. Man's laws go back to Blackstone and Justinian. Man's reapers and plows go back to the savage scratching the ground with his forked stick, drawn by the wild bullock. The heroes of liberty march forward in a solid column. Lincoln grasps the hand of Washington. Washington received his weapons at the hands of Hampden and Cromwell. The great Puritans lock hands with Luther and Savonarola. The unbroken procession brings us at length to him whose Sermon on the Mount was the very charter of liberty. It puts us under a divine spell to perceive that we are all co-workers with the great men, and yet single threads in the warp and woof of civilization. And when books have related us to our own age, and related all the epochs to God, whose providence is the Gulf Stream of history, these teachers go on to stimulate us to new and greater achievements. Alone, man is an unlighted candle. The mind needs some book to kindle its faculties. Before Byron began to write, he used to give half an hour to reading some favorite passage. The thought of some great writer never failed to kindle Byron into a creative glow, even as a match lights the kindlings upon the grate. In these burning, luminous moods, Byron's mind did its best work. The true book stimulates the mind, as no wine can ever quicken the blood. It is reading that brings us to our best, and rouses each faculty to its most vigorous life. We recognize this as pure cream, and if it seems at first to have its secondary source in the friendly milkman, let us not forget that the theme is the uses of books and reading. Dr. Hillis both sees and thinks. It is fashionable just now to decry the value of reading. We read, we are told, to avoid the necessity of thinking for ourselves. Books are for the mentally lazy. Though this is only a half-truth, the element of truth it contains is large enough to make us pause. Put yourself through a good old Presbyterian soul-searching self-examination, and if reading from thought laziness is one of your sins, confess it. No one can shrive you of it but yourself. Do penance for it by using your own brains, for it is a transgression that dwarfs the growth of thought and destroys mental freedom. At first the penance will be trying, but at the last you will be glad in it. Reading should entertain, give information, or stimulate thought. Here, however, we are chiefly concerned with information and stimulation of thought. What shall I read for information? The ample page of knowledge, as Gray tells us, is rich with the spoils of time, and these are ours for the price of a theater ticket. You may command Socrates and Marcus Aurelius to sit beside you and discourse of their choicest, hear Lincoln at Gettysburg and Pericles at Athens, storm the Bastille with Hugo, and wander through paradise with Dante. You may explore darkest Africa with Stanley, penetrate the human heart with Shakespeare, chat with Carlyle about heroes, and delve with the Apostle Paul into the mysteries of faith. The general knowledge and the inspiring ideas that men have collected through ages of toil and experiment are yours for the asking. The sage of Chelsea was right. The true university of these days is a collection of books. To master a worthwhile book is to master much else besides. Few of us, however, make perfect conquest of a volume without first owning it physically. To read a borrowed book may be a joy, but to assign your own book a place of its own on your own shelves, be they few or many, to love the book and feel of its worn cover, to thumb it over slowly, page by page, to pencil its margins in agreement or in protest, to smile or thrill with its remembered pungencies. No mere book borrower could ever sense all that delight. The reader who possesses books in this double sense finds also that his books possess him, and the volumes which most firmly grip his life are likely to be those it has cost him some sacrifice to own. These lightly come-by titles, which Mr. Fatpurse selects, perhaps by proxy, can scarcely play the guide, philosopher, and friend in crucial moments as do the books, long coveted, joyously attained, that are welcomed into the lives, and not merely the libraries, of us others who are at once poorer and richer. So it is scarcely too much to say that of all the many ways in which an owned, a mastered, book is like to a human friend, the truest ways are these. A friend is worth making sacrifices for, both to gain and to keep, and our loves go out most dearly to those into whose inmost lives we have sincerely entered. When you have not the advantage of the test of time by which to judge books, investigate as thoroughly as possible the authority of the books you read. Much that is printed and passes current is counterfeit. I read it in a book is to many a sufficient warranty of truth, but not to the thinker. What book? Asks the careful mind. Who wrote it? What does he know about the subject, and what right has he to speak on it? Who recognizes him as authority? With what other recognized authorities does he agree or disagree? Being caught trying to pass counterfeit money, even unintentionally, is an unpleasant situation. Beware lest you circulate spurious coin. Above all, seek reading that makes you use your own brains. Such reading must be alive with fresh points of view, packed with special knowledge, and deal with subjects of vital interest. Do not confine your reading to what you already know you will agree with. Opposition wakes one up. The other road may be the better, but you will never know it unless you give it the once-over. Do not do all your thinking and investigating in front of given QEDs, merely assembling reasons to fill in between your theorem and what you want to prove will get you nowhere. Approach each subject with an open mind and, once sure that you have thought it out thoroughly and honestly, have the courage to abide by the decision of your own thought, but don't brag about it afterward. No book on public speaking will enable you to discourse on the tariff if you know nothing about the tariff. Knowing more about it than the other man will be your only hope for making the other man listen to you. Take a group of men discussing a governmental policy of which someone says, "It is socialistic." That will commend the policy to Mr. A, who believes in socialism, but condemn it to Mr. B, who does not. It may be that neither had considered the policy beyond noticing that its surface color was socialistic. The chances are, furthermore, that neither Mr. A nor Mr. B has a definite idea of what socialism really is, for as Robert Louis Stevenson says, man lives not by bread alone, but chiefly by catchwords. If you are of this group of men, and have observed this proposed government policy, and investigated it, and thought about it, what you have to say cannot fail to command their respect and approval, for you will have shown them that you possess a grasp of your subject and, to adopt an exceedingly expressive bit of slang, then some. Questions and exercises. 1. Robert Houdin trained his son to give one swift glance at a shop window in passing and be able to report accurately a surprising number of its contents. Try this several times on different windows and report the result. 2. What effect does reserve power have on an audience? 3. What are the best methods for acquiring reserve power? 4. What is the danger of too much reading? 5. Analyze some speech that you have read or heard and notice how much real information there is in it. Compare it with Dr. Hillis's speech on Brave Little Belgium, page 394. 6. Write out a 3-minute speech on any subject you choose. How much information and what new ideas does it contain? Compare your speech with the extract on page 191 from Dr. Hillis's The Uses of Books and Reading. 7. Have you ever read a book on the practice of thinking? If so, give your impressions of its value. Note, there are a number of excellent books on the subject of thought and the management of thought. The following are recommended as being especially helpful. Thinking and Learning to Think, Nathan C. Schaefer. Talks to Students on the Art of Study, Kramer. As a Man Thinketh, Allen. 8. Define A. Logic, B. Mental philosophy or mental science, C. Psychology, D. Abstract. End of section 17. Recording by Joe Mabry at www.ievoice.com. Section 18 of the Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joe Mabry. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 18. Chapter 18, Subject and Preparation. Suit your topics to your strength, and ponder well your subject and its length, nor lift your load before you're quite aware what weight your shoulders will or will not bear. Byron, Hints from Horace. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is already a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Such is the salutation of the dawn. From the Sanskrit. In the chapter preceding, we have seen the influence of thought and reserve power on general preparedness for public speech. But preparation consists in something more definite than the cultivation of thought power, whether from original or from borrowed sources. It involves a specifically acquisitive attitude of the whole life. If you would become a full soul, you must constantly take in and assimilate, for in that way only may you hope to give out that which is worth the hearing. But do not confuse the acquisition of general information with the mastery of specific knowledge. Information consists of a fact or group of facts. Knowledge is organized information. Knowledge knows a fact in relation to other facts. Now, the important thing here is that you should set all your faculties to take in the things about you with the particular object of correlating them and storing them for use in public speech. You must hear with the speaker's ear, see with the speaker's eye, and choose books and companions and sights and sounds with the speaker's purpose in view. At the same time, be ready to receive unplanned for knowledge. One of the fascinating elements in your life as a public speaker will be the conscious growth in power that casual daily experiences bring. If your eyes are alert, you will be constantly discovering facts, illustrations, and ideas without having set out in search of them. These all may be turned to account on the platform. Even the leaden events of humdrum daily life may be melted into bullets for future battles. Conservation of time and preparation. But, you say, I have so little time for preparation. My mind must be absorbed by other matters. Daniel Webster never let an opportunity pass to gather material for his speeches. When he was a boy working in a sawmill, he read out of a book in one hand and busied himself at some mechanical task with the other. In youth, Patrick Henry roamed the fields and woods in solitude for days at a time, unconsciously gathering material and impressions for his later service as a speaker. Dr. Russell H. Conwell, the man who, the late Charles A. Dana said, had addressed more hearers than any living man, used to memorize long passages from Milton while tending the boiling syrup pans in the silent New England woods at night. The modern employer would discharge a Webster of today for inattention to duty, and doubtless he would be justified. And Patrick Henry seemed only an idle chap even in those easy-going days. But the truth remains. Those who take in power and have the purpose to use it efficiently will someday win to the place in which that stored-up power will revolve great wheels of influence. Napoleon said that quarter hours decide the destinies of nations. How many quarter hours do we let drift by aimlessly? Robert Louis Stevenson conserved all his time. Every experience became capital for his work, for capital may be defined as the results of labor stored up to assist future production. He continually tried to put into suitable language the scenes and actions that were in evidence about him. Emerson says, quote, "Tomorrow will be like today. Life wastes itself whilst we are preparing to live." End quote. Why wait for a more convenient season for this broad, general preparation? The 15 minutes that we spend on the car could be profitably turned into speech capital. Procure a cheap edition of modern speeches, and by cutting out a few pages each day, and reading them during the idle minute here and there, note how soon you can make yourself familiar with the world's best speeches. If you do not wish to mutilate your book, take it with you. Most of the epoch-making books are now printed in small volumes. The daily waste of natural gas in the Oklahoma fields is equal to 10,000 tons of coal. Only about 3% of the power of the coal that enters the furnace ever diffuses itself from your electric bulb as light. The other 97% is wasted. Yet these wastes are no larger nor more to be lamented than the tremendous waste of time which, if conserved, would increase the speaker's powers to their nth degree. Scientists are making 3 ears of corn grow where 1 grew before. Efficiency engineers are eliminating useless motions and products from our factories. Catch the spirit of the age and apply efficiency to the use of the most valuable asset you possess, time. What do you do mentally with the time you spend in dressing or in shaving? Take some subject and concentrate your energies on it for a week by utilizing just the spare moments that would otherwise be wasted. You will be amazed at the result. 1 passage a day from the Book of Books, 1 golden ingot from some mastermind, 1 fully possessed thought of your own might thus be added to the treasury of your life. Do not waste your time in ways that profit you nothing. Fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, and on the platform you will be immeasurably the gainer. Let no word of this, however, seem to decry the value of recreation. Nothing is more vital to a worker than rest, yet nothing is so vitiating to the shirker. Be sure that your recreation recreates. A pause in the midst of labors gathers strength for new effort. The mistake is to pause too long, or to fill your pauses with ideas that make life flabby. Choosing a subject. Subject and materials tremendously influence each other. This arises from the fact that there are 2 distinct ways in which a subject may be chosen, by arbitrary choice or by development from thought and reading. Arbitrary choice of one subject from among a number involves so many important considerations that no speaker ever fails to appreciate the tone of satisfaction in him who triumphantly announces, "I have a subject." Do give me a subject. How often the weary school teachers hear that cry. Then a list of themes is suggested, gone over, considered, and, in most instances, rejected, because the teacher can know but imperfectly what is in the pupil's mind. To suggest a subject in this way is like trying to discover the street on which a lost child lives, by naming over a number of streets until one strikes the little one's ear as sounding familiar. Choice by development is a very different process. It does not ask, "What shall I say?" It turns the mind in upon itself and asks, "What do I think?" Thus, the subject may be said to choose itself, for in the process of thought or of reading, one theme rises into prominence and becomes a living germ, soon to grow into the discourse. He who has not learned to reflect is not really acquainted with his own thoughts. Hence, his thoughts are not productive. Habits of reading and reflection will supply the speaker's mind with an abundance of subjects of which he already knows something from the very reading and reflection which gave birth to his theme. This is not a paradox, but sober truth. It must be already apparent that the choice of a subject by development savors more of collection than of conscious selection. The subject pops into the mind. In the intellect of the trained thinker it concentrates, by a process which we have seen to be induction, the facts and truths of which he has been reading and thinking. This is most often a gradual process. The scattered ideas may be but vaguely connected at first, but more and more they concentrate and take on a single form until at length one strong idea seems to grasp the soul with irresistible force and to cry aloud, "Arise, I am your theme. Henceforth, until you transmute me by the alchemy of your inward fire into vital speech, you shall know no rest." Happy then is that speaker, for he has found a subject that grips him. Of course, experienced speakers use both methods of selection. Even a reading and reflective man is sometimes compelled to hunt for a theme from Dan to Beersheba, and then the task of gathering materials becomes a serious one. But even in such a case there is a sense in which the selection comes by development, because no careful speaker settles upon a theme which does not represent at least some matured thought. How to attract and hold an audience? J. Berg Esenwein. Deciding on the subject matter. Even when your theme has been chosen for you by someone else, there remains to you a considerable field for choice of subject matter. The same considerations, in fact, that would govern you in choosing a theme must guide in the selection of the material. Ask yourself, or someone else, such questions as these. What is the precise nature of the occasion? How large an audience may be expected? From what walks of life do they come? What is their probable attitude toward the theme? Who else will speak? Do I speak first, last, or where on the program? What are the other speakers going to talk about? What is the nature of the auditorium? Is there a desk? Could the subject be more effectively handled if somewhat modified? Precisely how much time am I to fill? It is evident that many speech misfits of subject, speaker, occasion, and place are due to failure to ask just such pertinent questions. What should be said, by whom, and in what circumstances, constitute 90% of efficiency in public address. No matter who asks you, refuse to be a square peg in a round hole. Questions of proportion. Proportion in a speech is attained by a nice adjustment of time. How fully you may treat your subject it is not always for you to say. Let 10 minutes mean neither 9 nor 11, though better 9 than 11 at all events. You wouldn't steal a man's watch, no more should you steal the time of the succeeding speaker, or that of the audience. There is no need to overstep time limits if you make your preparation adequate and divide your subject so as to give each thought its due proportion of attention, and no more. Blessed is the man that maketh short speeches, for he shall be invited to speak again. Another matter of prime importance is, what part of your address demands the most emphasis? This once decided, you will know where to place that pivotal section so as to give it the greatest strategic value, and what degree of preparation must be given to that central thought so that the vital part may not be submerged by non-essentials. Many a speaker has awakened to find that he has burnt up 8 minutes of a 10-minute speech in merely getting up steam. That is like spending 80% of your building money on the vestibule of the house. The same sense of proportion must tell you to stop precisely when you are through, and it is to be hoped that you will discover the arrival of that period before your audience does. Tapping original sources. The surest way to give life to speech material is to gather your facts at first hand. Your words come with the weight of authority when you can say, I have examined the employment rolls of every mill in this district and find that 32% of the children employed are under the legal age. No citation of authorities can equal that. You must adopt the methods of the reporter and find out the facts underlying your argument or appeal. To do so may prove laborious, but it should not be irksome, for the great world of fact teems with interest, and over and above all is the sense of power that will come to you from original investigation. To see and feel the facts you are discussing will react upon you much more powerfully than if you were to secure the facts at second hand. Live an active life among people who are doing worthwhile things. Keep eyes and ears and mind and heart open to absorb truth, and then tell of the things you know, as if you know them. The world will listen, for the world loves nothing so much as real life. How to use a library. Unsuspected treasures lie in the smallest library. Even when the owner has read every last page of his books, it is only in rare instances that he has full indexes to all of them, either in his mind or on paper, so as to make available the vast number of varied subjects touched upon or treated in volumes whose titles would never suggest such topics. For this reason, it is a good thing to take an odd hour now and then to browse. Take down one volume after another and look over its table of contents and its index. It is a reproach to any author of a serious book not to have provided a full index with cross-references. Then glance over the pages, making notes, mental or physical, of material that looks interesting and usable. Most libraries contain volumes that the owner is going to read some day. A familiarity with even the contents of such books on your own shelves will enable you to refer to them when you want help. Writings read long ago should be treated in the same way. In every chapter some surprise lurks to delight you. In looking up a subject, do not be discouraged if you do not find it indexed or outlined in the table of contents. You are pretty sure to discover some material under a related title. Suppose you set to work somewhat in this way to gather references on thinking. First, you look over your book titles, and there is Schaeffer's Thinking and Learning to Think. Near it is Kramer's Talks to Students on the Art of Study. That seems likely to provide some material, and it does. Naturally, you think next of your book on psychology, and there is help there. If you have a volume on the human intellect, you will have already turned to it. Suddenly you remember your encyclopedia and your dictionary of quotations. And now material fairly rains upon you. The problem is what not to use. In the encyclopedia you turn to every reference that includes or touches or even suggests thinking, and in the dictionary of quotations you do the same. The latter volume you find peculiarly helpful because it suggests several volumes to you that are on your own shelves. You never would have thought to look in them for references on this subject. Even fiction will supply help, but especially books of essays and biography. Be aware of your own resources. To make a general index to your library does away with the necessity for indexing individual volumes that are not already indexed. To begin with, keep a notebook by you, or small cards and paper cuttings in your pocket and on your desk will serve as well. The same notebook that records the impressions of your own experiences and thoughts will be enriched by the ideas of others. To be sure, This notebook habit means labor, but remember that more speeches have been spoiled by half-hearted preparation than by lack of talent. Laziness is an own brother to overconfidence, and both are your inveterate enemies, though they pretend to be soothing friends. Conserve your material by indexing every good idea on cards thus: Socialism. Progressive Socialism, envelope 16. Socialism a Fallacy, 96/210. General Article on Socialism, Howells, December 1913. Socialism and the Franchise, Forbes. Socialism in Ancient Life, original manuscript. Envelope 102. On the card illustrated above, clippings are indexed by giving the number of the envelope in which they are filed. The envelopes may be of any size desired and kept in any convenient receptacle. On the foregoing example, Progressive Socialism, envelope 16, will represent a clipping filed in envelope 16, which is, of course, numbered arbitrarily. The fractions refer to books in your library, the numerator being the book number, the denominator referring to the page. Thus, Socialism a Fallacy, 96/210, refers to page 210 of volume 96 in your library. By some arbitrary sign, say red ink, you may even index a reference in a public library book. If you preserve your magazine, important articles may be indexed by month and year. An entire volume on a subject may be indicated like the imaginary book by Forbes. If you clip the articles, it is better to index them according to the envelope system. Your own writings and notes may be filed in envelopes with the clippings or in a separate series. Another good indexing system combines the library index with the scrap or clipping system by making the outside of the envelope serve the same purpose as the card for the indexing of books, magazines, clippings, and manuscripts, the latter two classes of material being enclosed in the envelopes that index them, and all filed alphabetically. When your cards accumulate so as to make ready reference difficult under a single alphabet, you may subdivide each letter by subordinate guide cards marked by the vowels A, E, I, O, U. Thus, antiquities would be filed under I in A because A begins the word and the second letter N comes after the vowel I in the alphabet, but before O. In the same manner, Beecher would be filed under E in B, and hydrogen would come under U in H. Outlining the address. No one can advise you how to prepare the notes for an address. Some speakers get the best results while walking out and ruminating, jotting down notes as they pause in their walk. Others never put pen to paper until the whole speech has been thought out. The great majority, however, will take notes, classify their notes, write a hasty first draft, and then revise the speech. Try each of these methods and choose the one that is best for you. Do not allow any man to force you to work in his way, but do not neglect to consider his way, for it may be better than your own. For those who make notes and with their aid write out the speech, these suggestions may prove helpful. After having read and thought enough, classify your notes by setting down the big, central thoughts of your material on separate cards or slips of paper. These will stand in the same relation to your subject as chapters do to a book. Then arrange these main ideas or heads in such an order that they will lead effectively to the result you have in mind, so that the speech may rise in argument, in interest, in power, by piling one fact or appeal upon another until the climax, the highest point of influence on your audience, has been reached. Next, group all your ideas, facts, anecdotes, and illustrations under the foregoing main heads, each where it naturally belongs. You now have a skeleton or outline of your address that in its polished form might serve either as the brief or manuscript notes for the speech or as the guide outline which you will expand into the written address, if written it is to be. Imagine each of the main ideas in the brief on page 213 as being separate. Then picture your mind as sorting them out and placing them in order. Finally, conceive of how you would fill in the facts and examples under each head, giving special prominence to those you wish to emphasize and subduing those of less moment. In the end, you have the outline complete. The simplest form of outline, not very suitable for use on the platform, however, is the following. Why prosperity is coming. What prosperity means. The real tests of prosperity. Its basis in the soil. American agricultural progress. New interest in farming. Enormous value of our agricultural products. Reciprocal effect on trade. Foreign countries affected. Effects of our new internal economy. The regulation of banking and big business on prosperity. Effects of our revised attitude toward foreign markets, including our merchant marine. Summary. Obviously, this very simple outline is capable of considerable expansion under each head by the addition of facts, arguments, inferences, and examples. Here is an outline arranged with more regard for argument. Foreign immigration should be restricted. Adapted from Competition Rhetoric, Scott and Denny, page 241. 1. Fact as cause. Many immigrants are practically paupers. Proofs involving statistics or statements of authorities. 2. Fact as effect. They sooner or later fill our almshouses and become public charges. Proofs involving statistics or statements of authorities. 3. Fact as cause. Some of them are criminals. Examples of recent cases. 4. Fact as effect. They reinforce the criminal classes. Effects on our civic life. 5. Fact as cause. Many of them know nothing of the duties of free citizenship. Examples. 6. Fact as effect. Such immigrants recruit the worst element in our politics. Proofs. A more highly ordered grouping of topics and subtopics is shown in the following. Ours a Christian Nation. 1. Introduction. Why the subject is timely. Influences operative against this contention today. 2. Christianity presided over the early history of America. 1. First practical discovery by a Christian explorer. Columbus worshipped God on the new soil. 2. The Cavaliers. 3. The French Catholic settlers. 4. The Huguenots. 5. The Puritans. 3. The birth of our nation was under Christian auspices. 1. Christian character of Washington. 2. Other Christian patriots. 3. The Church in our Revolutionary Struggle. Muhlenberg. 4. Our later history has only emphasized our national attitude. Examples of dealings with foreign nations show Christian magnanimity. Returning the Chinese indemnity, fostering the Red Cross, attitude toward Belgium. 5. Our governmental forms and many of our laws are of Christian temper. 1. The use of the Bible in public ways, oaths, etc. 2. The Bible in our schools. 3. Christian chaplains minister to our law-making bodies, to our Army, and to our Navy. 4. The Christian Sabbath is officially and generally recognized. 5. The Christian family and the Christian system of morality are at the basis of our laws. 6. The life of the people testifies of the power of Christianity. Charities, education, etc. have Christian tone. 7. Other nations regard us as a Christian people. 8. Conclusion. The attitude which may reasonably be expected of all good citizens toward questions touching the preservation of our standing as a Christian nation. Writing and revision. After the outline has been perfected comes the time to write the speech, if write it you must. Then, whatever you do, write it at white heat, with not too much thought of anything but the strong, appealing expression of your ideas. The final stage is the paring down, the revision, the seeing again, as the word implies, when all the parts of the speech must be impartially scrutinized for clearness, precision, force, effectiveness, suitability, proportion, logical climax. And in all this you must imagine yourself to be before your audience, for a speech is not an essay, and what will convince and arouse in the one will not prevail in the other. The title. Often last of all will come that which in a sense is first of all, the title, the name by which the speech is known. Sometimes it will be the simple theme of the address, as The New Americanism by Henry Watterson, or it may be a bit of symbolism typifying the spirit of the address, as Acres of Diamonds by Russell H. Conwell, or it may be a fine phrase taken from the body of the address, as Pass Prosperity Around by Albert J. Beveridge. All in all, from whatever motive it be chosen, let the title be fresh, short, suited to the subject, and likely to excite interest. Questions and exercises. 1. Define A. Introduction, B. Climax, C. Peroration. 2. If a 30-minute speech would require 3 hours for specific preparation, would you expect to be able to do equal justice to a speech 1/3 as long in 1/3 the time for preparation? Give reasons. 3. Relate briefly any personal experience you may have had in conserving time for reading and thought. 4. In the manner of a reporter or investigator, go out and get first-hand information on some subject of interest to the public. Arrange the results of your research in the form of an outline or a brief. 5. From a private or a public library, gather enough authoritative material on one of the following questions to build an outline for a 20-minute address. Take one definite side of the question. A. The housing of the poor. B. The commission form of government for cities as a remedy for political graft. C. The test of women's suffrage in the West. D. Present trends of public taste in reading. E. Municipal art. F. Is the theater becoming more elevated in tone? G. The effects of the magazine on literature. H. Does modern life destroy ideals? I. Is competition the life of trade? J. Baseball is too absorbing to be a wholesome national game. K. Summer baseball and amateur standing. L. Does college training unfit a woman for domestic life? M. Does women's competition with man in business dull the spirit of chivalry? N. Are elective studies suited to high school courses? O. Does the modern college prepare men for preeminent leadership? P. The YMCA in its relation to the labor problem. Q. Public speaking as training in citizenship. 6. Construct the outline, examining it carefully for interest, convincing character, proportion, and climax of arrangement. Note, this exercise should be repeated until the student shows facility in synthetic arrangement. 7. Deliver the address, if possible, before an audience. 8. Make a 300-word report on the results as best you are able to estimate them. 9. Tell something of the benefits of using a periodical or cumulative index. 10. Give a number of quotations suitable for a speaker's use that you have memorized in off moments. 11. In the manner of the outline on page 213, analyze the address on pages 78 and 79, the history of liberty. 12. Give an outline analysis, from notes or memory, of an address or sermon to which you have listened for this purpose. 13. Criticize the address from a structural point of view. 14. Invent titles for any 5 of the themes in Exercise 5. 15. Criticize the titles of any 5 chapters of this book, suggesting better ones. 16. Criticize the title of any lecture or address of which you know. End of section 18. Recording by Joe Mabry at www.ievoice.com.
Section 19 of The Art of Public Speaking. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Avai in December 2010. The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie and Joseph Berg Esenwein. Section 19. Influencing by Exposition. Speak not at all, in any wise, till you have somewhat to speak. Care not for the reward of your speaking, but simply and with undivided mind for the truth of your speaking. Thomas Carlyle, Essay on Biography. A complete discussion of the rhetorical structure of public speeches requires a fuller treatise than can be undertaken in a work of this nature. Yet in this chapter and in the succeeding ones on description, narration, argument, and pleading, the underlying principles are given and explained as fully as need be for a working knowledge, and adequate book references are given for those who would perfect themselves in rhetorical art. The nature of exposition. In the word expose, to lay bare, to uncover, to show the true inwardness of, we see the foundation idea of exposition. It is the clear and precise setting forth of what the subject really is. It is explanation. Exposition does not draw a picture, for that would be description. To tell in exact terms what the automobile is, to name its characteristic parts and explain their workings, would be exposition. So would an explanation of the nature of fear. But to create a mental image of a particular automobile, with its glistening body, graceful lines, and great speed, would be description, and so would a picturing of fear acting on the emotions of a child at night. Exposition and description often intermingle and overlap, but fundamentally they are distinct. Their differences will be touched upon again in the chapter on description. Exposition, furthermore, does not include an account of how events happened. That is narration. When Peary lectured on his polar discoveries, he explained the instrument used for determining latitude and longitude. That was exposition. In picturing his equipment, he used description. In telling of his adventures day by day, he employed narration. In supporting some of his contentions, he used argument. Yet he mingled all these forms throughout the lecture. Neither does exposition deal with reasons and inferences. That is the field of argument. A series of connected statements intended to convince a prospective buyer that one automobile is better than another, or proofs that the appeal to fear is a wrong method of discipline, would not be exposition. The plain facts as set forth in expository speaking or writing are nearly always the basis of argument, yet the processes are not one. True, the statement of a single significant fact without the addition of another word may be convincing, but a moment's thought will show that the inference, which completes a chain of reasoning, is made in the mind of the hearer and presupposes other facts held in consideration. In like manner, it is obvious that the field of persuasion is not open to exposition, for exposition is entirely an intellectual process, with no emotional element. The importance of exposition. The importance of exposition in public speech is precisely the importance of setting forth a matter so plainly that it cannot be misunderstood. To master the process of exposition is to become a clear thinker. I know when you do not ask me. replied a gentleman upon being requested to define a highly complex idea. Now, some large concepts defy explicit definition, but no mind should take refuge behind such exceptions, for where definition fails, other forms succeed. Sometimes we feel confident that we have perfect mastery of an idea, but when the time comes to express it, the clearness becomes a haze. Exposition, then, is the test of clear understanding. To speak effectively, you must be able to see your subject clearly and comprehensively, and to make your audience see it as you do. There are pitfalls on both sides of this path. To explain too little will leave your audience in doubt as to what you mean. It is useless to argue a question if it is not perfectly clear just what is meant by the question. Have you never come to a blind lane in conversation by finding that you were talking of one aspect of a matter while your friend was thinking of another? If two do not agree in their definitions of a musician, it is useless to dispute over a certain man's right to claim the title. On the other side of the path lies the abyss of tediously explaining too much. That offends because it impresses the hearers that you either do not respect their intelligence or are trying to blow a breeze into a tornado. Carefully estimate the probable knowledge of your audience, both in general and of the particular point you are explaining. In trying to simplify, it is fatal to sillify. To explain more than is needed for the purposes of your argument or appeal is to waste energy all around. In your efforts to be explicit, do not press exposition to the extent of dullness. The confines are not far distant, and you may arrive before you know it. Some purposes of exposition. From what has been said, it ought to be clear that, primarily, exposition weaves a cord of understanding between you and your audience. It lays, furthermore, a foundation of fact on which to build later statements, arguments, and appeals. In scientific and purely information speeches, exposition may exist by itself and for itself, as in a lecture on biology or on psychology. But in the vast majority of cases, it is used to accompany and prepare the way for the other forms of discourse. Clearness, precision, accuracy, unity, truth, and necessity. These must be the constant standards by which you test the efficiency of your expositions, and, indeed, that of every explanatory statement. This dictum should be written on your brain in letters most plain, and let this apply not alone to the purposes of exposition, but in equal measure to your use of the methods of exposition. The various ways along which a speaker may proceed in exposition are likely to touch each other now and then, and even when they do not meet and actually overlap, they run so nearly parallel that the roads are sometimes distinct rather in theory than in any more practical respect. Definition, the primary expository method, is a statement of precise limits. Obviously, here the greatest care must be exercised that the terms of definition should not themselves demand too much definition, that the language should be concise and clear, and that the definition should neither exclude nor include too much. The following is a simple example. To expound is to set forth the nature, the significance, the characteristics, and the bearing of an idea or a group of ideas. Arlo Bates, Talks on Writing English. Contrast and antithesis are often used effectively to amplify definition, as in this sentence, which immediately follows the above-cited definition. Exposition therefore differs from description in that it deals directly with the meaning or intent of its subject instead of with its appearance. This antithesis forms an expansion of the definition, and as such it might have been still further extended. In fact, this is a frequent practice in public speech, where the minds of the hearers often ask for reiteration and expanded statement to help them grasp a subject in its several aspects. This is the very heart of exposition, to amplify and clarify all the terms by which a matter is defined. Example is another method of amplifying a definition or of expounding an idea more fully. The following sentences immediately succeed Mr. Bates' definition and contrast just quoted. A good deal which we are accustomed inexactly to call description is really exposition. Suppose that your small boy wishes to know how an engine works and should say, "Please describe the steam engine to me." If you insist on taking his words literally, and are willing to run the risk of his indignation at being willfully misunderstood, you will to the best of your ability picture to him this familiarly wonderful machine. If you explain it to him, you are not describing, but expounding it. The chief value of example is that it makes clear the unknown by referring the mind to the known. Readiness of mind to make illuminating, apt comparisons for the sake of clearness is one of the speaker's chief resources on the platform. It is the greatest of all teaching gifts. It is a gift, moreover, that responds to cultivation. Read the 3 extracts from Arlo Bates, as their author delivered them, as one passage, and see how they melt into one, each part supplementing the other most helpfully. Analogy, which calls attention to similar relationships in objects not otherwise similar, is one of the most useful methods of exposition. The following striking specimen is from Beecher's Liverpool speech. A savage is a man of one story, and that one story a cellar. When a man begins to be civilized, he raises another story. When you Christianize and civilize the man, you put story upon story, for you develop faculty after faculty, and you have to supply every story with your productions. Discarding is a less common form of platform explanation. It consists in clearing away associated ideas so that the attention may be centered on the main thought to be discussed. Really, it is a negative factor in exposition, though a most important one, for it is fundamental to the consideration of an intricately related matter that subordinate and side questions should be set aside in order to bring out the main issue. Here is an example of the method. I cannot allow myself to be led aside from the only issue before this jury. It is not pertinent to consider that this prisoner is the husband of a heartbroken woman, and that his babes will go through the world under the shadow of the law's extremest penalty worked upon their father. We must forget the venerable father and the mother whom heaven in pity took before she learned of her son's disgrace. What have these matters of heart? What have the blenched faces of his friends? What have the prisoner's long and honorable career to say before this bar, when you are sworn to weigh only the direct evidence before you? The one and only question for you to decide on the evidence is whether this man did with revengeful intent commit the murder that every impartial witness has solemnly laid at his door. Classification assigns a subject to its class. By an allowable extension of the definition, it may be said to assign it also under its order, genus, and species. Classification is useful in public speech in narrowing the issue to a desired phase. It is equally valuable for showing a thing in its relation to other things, or in correlation. Classification is closely akin to definition and division. This question of the liquor traffic, sirs, takes its place beside the grave moral issue of all times. Whatever be its economic significance, and who is there to question it, whatever vital bearing it has upon our political system, and is there one who will deny it, The question of the licensed saloon must quickly be settled as the world in its advancement has settled the questions of constitutional government for the masses, of the opium traffic, of the serf, and of the slave, not as matters of economic and political expediency, but as questions of right and wrong. Analysis separates a subject into its essential parts. This it may do by various principles. For example, analysis may follow the order of time, geologic eras, order of place, geographic facts, logical order, a sermon outline, order of increasing interest or procession to a climax, a lecture on 20th century poets, and so on. A classic example of analytical exposition is the following. In philosophy, the contemplations of man do either penetrate unto God, or are circumferred to nature, or are reflected or reverted upon himself. Out of which several inquiries there do arise three knowledges: divine philosophy, natural philosophy, and human philosophy or humanity. For all things are marked and stamped with this triple character, or the power of God, the difference of nature, and the use of man. Lord Bacon, The Advancement of Learning. Division differs only from analysis in that analysis follows the inherent divisions of a subject, as illustrated in the foregoing passage, while division arbitrarily separates the subject for convenience of treatment, as in the following non-too-logical example. For civil history it is of three kinds, not unfitly to be compared with the three kinds of pictures or images. For of pictures or images we see some are unfinished, some are perfect, and some are defaced. So of histories we may find three kinds: memorials, perfect histories, and antiquities. For memorials are history unfinished, or the first or rough drafts of history, and antiquities are history defaced, or some remnants of history which have casually escaped the shipwreck of time. Lord Bacon, The Advancement of Learning. Generalization states a broad principle or a general truth, derived from examination of a considerable number of individual facts. This synthetic exposition is not the same as argumentative generalization, which supports a general contention by citing instances in proof. Observe how Holmes begins with one fact, and by adding another and another reaches a complete whole. This is one of the most effective devices in the public speaker's repertory. Take a hollow cylinder, the bottom closed while the top remains open, and pour in water to the height of a few inches. Next, cover the water with a flat plate or piston, which fits the interior of the cylinder perfectly. Then apply heat to the water, and we shall witness the following phenomena. After the lapse of some minutes, the water will begin to boil, and the steam accumulating at the upper surface will make room for itself by raising the piston slightly. As the boiling continues, more and more steam will be formed, and raise the piston higher and higher, till all the water is boiled away, and nothing but steam is left in the cylinder. Now this machine, consisting of cylinder, piston, water, and fire, is the steam engine in its most elementary form. For a steam engine may be defined as an apparatus for doing work by means of heat applied to water, and since raising such a weight as the piston is a form of doing work, this apparatus, clumsy and inconvenient though it may be, answers the definition precisely. Reference to experience is one of the most vital principles in exposition, as in every other form of discourse. Reference to experience, as here used, means reference to the known. The known is that which the listener has seen, heard, read, felt, believed, or done, and which still exists in his consciousness, his stock of knowledge. It embraces all those thoughts, feelings, and happenings which are to him real. Reference to experience, then, means coming into the listener's life. The vast results obtained by science are won by no mystical faculties, by no mental processes other than those which are practiced by every one of us in the humblest and meanest affairs of life. A detective policeman discovers a burglar from the marks made by his shoe, by a mental process identical with that by which Cuvier restored the extinct animals of Montmartre from fragments of their bones. Nor does that process of induction and deduction by which a lady, finding a stain of a particular kind upon her dress, concludes that somebody has upset the inkstand thereon, differ in any way from that by which Adams and Leverrier discovered a new planet. The man of science, in fact, simply uses with scrupulous exactness the methods which we all habitually and at every moment use carelessly. Thomas Henry Huxley, Lay Sermons. Do you set down your name in the scroll of youth, that are written down old with all the characters of age? Have you not a moist eye, a dry hand, a yellow cheek, a white beard, a decreasing leg, an increasing belly? Is not your voice broken, your wind short, your chin double, your wit single, and every part about you blasted with antiquity? And will you yet call yourself young? Fie, 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 Sir John! Shakespeare, The Merry Wives of Windsor. Finally, in preparing expository material, ask yourself these questions regarding your subject. What is it, and what is it not? What is it like and unlike? What are its causes and effects? How shall it be divided? With what subjects is it correlated? What experiences does it recall? What examples illustrate it? Questions and exercises. 1. What would be the effect of adhering to any one of the forms of discourse in a public address? 2. Have you ever heard such an address? 3. Invent a series of examples illustrative of the distinctions made on pages 232 and 233. 4. Make a list of 10 subjects that might be treated largely, if not entirely, by exposition. 5. Name the 6 standards by which expository writing should be tried. 6. Define any one of the following: A. Storage battery. B. A free hand. C. Sailboat. D. The big stick. E. Nonsense. F. A good sport. G. Short story. H. Novel. I. Newspaper. J. Politician. K. Jealousy. L. Truth. M. Matinee girl. N. College honor system. O. Modish. P. Slum. Q. Settlement work. R. Forensic. 7. Amplify the definition by antithesis. 8. Invent 2 examples to illustrate the definition of question 6. 9. Invent 2 analogies for the same subject of question 6. 10. Make a short speech based on one of the following: A. Wages and salary. B. Master and man. C. War and peace. D. Home and the boarding house. E. Struggle and victory. F. Ignorance and ambition. 11. Make a 10-minute speech on any of the topics named in question 6, using all the methods of exposition already named. 12. Explain what is meant by discarding topics collateral and subordinate to a subject. 13. Rewrite the jury speech on page 224. 14. Define correlation. 15. Write an example of classification on any political, social, economic, or moral issue of the day. 16. Make a brief analytical statement of Henry W. Grady's The Race Problem. 17. By which analytical principle did you proceed? 18. Write a short, carefully generalized speech from a large amount of data on one of the following subjects. A. The servant girl problem. B. Cats. C. The baseball craze. D. Reform administrations. E. Suing societies. F. Coeducation. G. The traveling salesman. 19. Observe this passage from Newton's Effective Speaking. That man is a cynic. He sees goodness nowhere. He sneers at virtue, sneers at love. To him the maiden plighting her troth is an artful schemer, and he sees even in the mother's kiss nothing but an empty conventionality. Write, commit, and deliver 2 similar passages based on your choice from this list. A. The egotist. B. The sensualist. C. The hypocrite. D. The timid man. E. The joker. F. The flirt. G. The ungrateful woman. H. The mournful man. In both cases, use the principle of reference to experience. 20. Write a passage on any of the foregoing characters in imitation of the style of Shakespeare's characterization of Sir John Falstaff, page 227. End of section 19.